Chapter 246. A bunch of ingrates. How dare they still have the face to stand in this world? Heaven is blind. The bearded man's voice was not soft, filled with disdain. Your father is actually a soldier with such trash my entire life. What a disgrace. The northern troop is really something. After so many years of war, they were the most useless, the ones who lost the most battles. The 9 Supremes went to help the most as well. In the end, it was these fellows who murdered the 9 Supremes. Xueqi. It looks like they can even kill their own parents. There's nothing impossible about it. It's definitely possible. Come, let's go back. Await the order. Let's see if these fellows can still be arrogant after the evidence of their crimes is conclusive. If they still dare to be arrogant, your father will annihilate these bastards even if it means being beheaded. The bearded general finished his words and left with his men with a wave of his hand. Clip clop clop clop. A group of soldiers on duty lowered their heads, tears dripping onto the ground. They were so ashamed that they did not want to show their faces. Gradually, sobs could be heard. Outside, whispers could be heard among the troops. The 9 Supremes Lord's flags of revenge have been raised in our military base. Why hasn't it been raised here? Don't they care about the 9 Supremes Lords? Don't they want to avenge the Lords? That's the northern troop we're talking about. They're the ones who murdered the 9 Supremes Lords. Not to mention that they don't have the face to raise the flags. I'm guessing they don't even want to, at least they don't dare to. It turns out that not only is Yang Buotao a coward, even his subordinates are a bunch of cowards. They don't even dare to raise the 9 Supremes Lords' flags of revenge. I wonder if they're guilty or if that's what they think. Xueqi. Don't these people have the slightest bit of shame in them? Your father is going crazy from anger just thinking about it. The 9 Supremes Lords have saved the northern troops so many times. How can they be so heartless? They're not even human. Where does their conscience come from? It's been eaten by King Dog. Pfft, don't you dare insult a dog. How can a dog eat a black heart? Their hearts are all black. If we really fight, your father won't show mercy. I'll just take it as killing a dog. Me too. Me too. I told you not to trample on dogs. Dogs are the most loyal. How can they be compared to dogs? Exactly. In front of the barracks, all the soldiers lowered their heads and tilted their necks fiercely, squinting at their squad leader. Their gazes were fierce and overflowing with killing intent. Captain Zheng's eyes were red. He lowered his head and gritted his teeth. Wait here, I'll go ask. Go. We should have gone long ago. More than a dozen cries rang out at the same time. The captain wiped his tears, mounted his horse, and rode away with all his might. General! Why don't we raise the 9 Supremes Lord's revenge flag? Captain Zheng was on the verge of breaking down. He ran out of the tent and cried. Our brothers from the other directions have already risen. Are we really that guilty? The general was taken aback. What flag of vengeance? It's a flag of revenge to seek justice for the 9 Supremes Lords. Why don't we raise it? Captain Zheng bawled, wiping his tears and snot all over his face. Your father has been a soldier for so many years. I'm used to seeing life and death on the battlefield. Your father has never cried in water or fire. But today, your father has had enough. Your father has been humiliated to this extent, yet I dare not make a sound. I wish I could die right now. When I heard that the 9 Supremes Lords were killed, your father cut my own face and swore a blood oath to avenge them. Now, the spearhead of the 9 Supremes Lords' murder is actually directed at us. Could it be that the rumors are true? Are we, the northern troop, really a bunch of ungrateful people? Murdering our saviors. How can our brothers still have the face to live? Captain Zheng was sobbing, his tears and snot running down his face. Flag of vengeance? The general's eyes were bloodshot as well. Send a few men to check on the situation. I'm not going. I'm not going. I'm not going either. One of the deputy generals was appointed. His face turned red as he roared. Why should I go? Why don't you go? What face do you have to go out now? Even if your father stuffed my face into my pants, it's all gone. How can I have the face to go out and face the other brothers? The general's eyes were spitting fire. None of you want to go out? Then F***CK off your father. Your father will go out and have a look myself. The general urged his horse forward. It was only the time it took to drink a cup of tea before he came back again and again. His face was flushed, his eyes bloodshot as he roared, "Make flags for your father. Raise the flags. Set up the altar. Faster. We, the Northern Troop brothers, are not ungrateful people. We have no cowards. If Yang Butao really murdered the 9 Supremes Lords, the Northern Troop brothers will be the first to find him." The general bellowed. Once the command was given, the entire military base was in an uproar. The soldiers went back to make flags, their faces finally showing some signs of life. "Gather the men. Gather." The general bellowed again. Suddenly, a troop of men came over with a cold expression. "What? Jiang Chenglong, are you trying to rebel by gathering your men privately?" It was Yang Butao's most elite janissaries who had come over. The one who spoke was his janissary general. Jiang Chenglong looked over with bloodshot eyes and waved his hand. "Gather. Ignore them." The janissary general strode forward. "Jiang Chenglong, how dare you make the decision without the marshal's order? It's your business if you're not afraid of death, but it's not good if you implicate your brothers. How many lives do you have to pay for it?" The janissary was a quick-witted man. He knew that it was futile to suppress the situation and would only bring about the opposite effect. However, it might be effective if he shifted the threat to his subordinates. Jiang Chenglong's eyes glared as if they were about to burst into tears of blood as he said fiercely, "If Yang Butao is really related to the 9 Supremes' murder, then he's not fit to be our Northern Troops' marshal. Your father will fight him with my life. So what if your father gave this assembly order on my own? At most, your father will pay with my life later, and your father will definitely give this order. F***CKU. The marshal is innocent. Didn't we explain everything clearly yesterday?" The janissary general roared. "If the marshal is innocent, when the truth comes to light, I, Jiang Chenglong, will tie my own hands and ask for my own death. Gathering military forces on my own merits, death awaits. The military law is merciless. But now, the Northern Troop must act according to my order." Jiang Chenglong roared, "As the deputy marshal, I have the authority to mobilize the troops. You're only the head of Yang Butao's janissary troops. What right do you have to ask your father what to do? Get out of the way, or else, I'll punish you according to military law right now." The janissary general's gaze turned to stare at Jiang Chenglong, his hands slowly pressing on the hilt of his saber. Jiang Chenglong did not move, his gaze equally fierce. In spite of this, everyone around Jiang Chenglong roared at the same time, unsheathing their sabers and swords as they looked at Yang Butao's Qin soldiers like hungry wolves. Only a glance or a movement was needed, and it would be a huge battle. "Get back!" Jiang Chenglong hollered. "Do you really want to do this?" The janissary captain sucked in a deep breath and pointed a finger at Jiang Chenglong. "Just you wait." He turned to lead his men back. "Now do as I say. Immediately. Immediately." Jiang Chenglong's expression was steely. The janissary captain returned to his own tent with a heavy expression, only to find that an altar had been erected outside his tent. The portraits of the 9 Supremes had been placed there. The captain's gaze wavered. The janissary soldiers around him evaded his gaze. Some were panting, everyone seemed to have a bellyful of things to say. "Captain, is it true?" Finally, a man asked in a trembling voice. "I believe in the marshal. He would never do such a thing. It's all the lies of spies. They're distorting the truth." The captain said through gritted teeth. "What if it's really the marshal's doing?" Another man asked. The captain's facial muscles twitched. He did not speak for a moment. He stood straight, looking at the portraits of the 9 Supremes. Suddenly, he knelt down. All the janissary soldiers' faces darkened. As the marshal's janissary soldiers, we're always at the forefront in every battle. Every time we lose, it's also when we're the most desperate and in the most dangerous situation. Therefore, every time the 9 Supremes Lords make a move, it's equivalent to saving everyone. But we're the marshal's janissary soldiers. If this is true, the entire Northern Troop can say that it's the marshal's doing alone. It has nothing to do with the Northern Troop. Only we can't say that. No one will believe us even if we say it. We're the marshal's janissary soldiers. We're the marshal's most trusted and closest people. We are indebted to the 9 Supreme's lords for saving our lives countless times, but we are also indebted to the Marshal. The captain closed his eyes and said quietly, if it's true, his voice suddenly choked. If it's true, no matter which side we're on now, how can we live after this? As his words trailed off, the surroundings fell into silence. In the palace, Grand Commandant Feng Qingtian reclined on his chair, panting laboriously. His Majesty sat on the big chair in the royal study, quietly waiting for the results. Qiu Zhenhan and Lang Daoyin stared at the old Grand Commandant with widened eyes. After a long time, Feng Qingtian opened his eyes and said, "What Yang Buotao said was a lie. Moreover, he seemed to have prepared it a long time ago. So, there must be something wrong with Yang Buotao in this matter." His Majesty nodded calmly and said, "With the old Grand Commandant's testimony, the truth is clear. However, Yang Buotao's betrayal has become a trivial matter. The real crux should be, the tornado that appeared last night, was it Supreme Wind himself? And the one who attacked with fire, was it Supreme Flame?" Chapter 247. Qiu Zhenhan said, "From what I see, this is most likely true. There's indeed something wrong with the flame, but Supreme Wind can basically confirm it. It's just that it's hard to say if he's willing to show himself." Old Grand Commandant Feng Qingtian coughed and said, "Your Majesty, please don't let your guard down. Although my ingenious providence can tell that Yang Buotao is suspicious, it's not as obvious as it used to be. It's not hard to deduce that Yang Buotao might have other tricks up his sleeves. His true ability is most probably not as simple as what we've seen. Besides, he's still one of Yutong's 4 marshals," His Majesty frowned and said. "That's right. I was too naive just now. Putting aside the possibility that Yang Buotao might have hidden his true strength, this matter has been pushed to the forefront now. It's impossible to take down Yang Buotao, an important military general, one of Yutong's 4 marshals, with mere groundless evidence. It's not something that I can do alone. However, if Supreme Wind really reappears, as long as Supreme Wind is determined to capture Yang Buotao, he'll definitely appear to verify this matter. As long as Supreme Wind appears and proves his identity, Yang Buotao won't need to be interrogated at all. He'll be convicted directly and the soldiers under his command won't defend him. However, if Supreme Wind doesn't appear, this matter," His Majesty pondered. Old Marshal Qiu Zhenhan said, "It's inevitable that Supreme Wind will appear. However, what we need to worry about now is actually the same as Supreme Wind's concern. Once Supreme Wind appears, what can we do to ensure his safety?" "Difficult." Old Grand Commandant Feng Qingtian coughed and covered his mouth with his hand. Lang Daoyin passed him a handkerchief swiftly. Feng Qingtian spat out a mouthful of phlegm, his breath finally smoothing out. He said, "Difficult. As long as Supreme Wind doesn't appear, he can do whatever he wants in this world. However, if his whereabouts are exposed, he'll definitely become the target of all his enemies." Back then, the 9 Supremes were still about to perish under the heavy ambush. Now that there's only Supreme Wind by himself, even with Supreme Flame's help, the situation is still not optimistic. After all, the enemies they have to face include enemy countries and the martial world. "There are even many spies in this dynasty," Old Grand Commandant panted and said. "It's impossible to guard against. If Supreme Wind appears, he can kill Yang Buotao, but the price is too high. The loss outweighs the gain." Old Grand Commandant coughed violently and said, "This old official knows Your Majesty's intention. He wants to meet Supreme Wind and ease his mind. However, using such a method to force Supreme Wind out, the disadvantages outweigh the advantages. It's not worth it. In my opinion, why don't we just cut the chase and kill Yang Buotao's family?" The old Grand Commandant coughed a few times and said, "In this way, Supreme Wind doesn't have to show himself. His Majesty's arbitrary actions are undesirable, but it's not that he can't or shouldn't do so. If we can be sure, Yang Buotao's death will be fine. But if we can't be sure, be it me or the military, we can't get rid of the stigma of killing a good man. The price will be equally huge. Grand Commandant, using the exquisite jade heart to prove that Yang Buotao is unusual. We can believe it, but it can't be used as proof. If we really do so, the outside world will only say that an unknown assassin in black turned into a gust of wind and made us kill a country's marshal with a single sentence." His Majesty smiled bitterly. "There are many follow-up issues. If we don't handle it well, it might lead to another Xueqi incident. Furthermore, the military of the other countries will probably make a big deal out of this, breaking down Yutong's military morale bit by bit. Old Grand Commandant frowned, speechless. His Majesty's considerations were reasonable. Acting rashly without any proof would not be able to hide the world's gossip. The Empire of Yutong was the world's public enemy. Once there was an opportunity to attack, the other countries would not let it go easily. Supreme Win's reappearance this time is targeted at Yang Buotao. I believe he has the intention to bring Yang Buotao to justice. As long as he doesn't reveal his real face and identity, there won't be too much trouble. Lang Daoyin said, the only thing that needs to be resolved is probably the aftermath of Supreme Win's reappearance. Breaking away from the tracking of those with ulterior motives is the key now. I can basically confirm that if there's something fishy going on with Yang Buotao, the reason why the people behind him did not provide more support to help him get out of his predicament is probably because they're waiting for Supreme Win to show up and use this opportunity to understand Supreme Win's real identity. Lang Daoyin said, since they're waiting, they must have the means to track him down. They might even have the confidence to stop Supreme Wind from turning into a gust of wind. Just like what Old Lang said, this is the most troublesome problem. The mysterious arcane skills that these people of Shanhai possess are really not something that we can speculate about now. Qiu Jianhan sighed deeply. How's the current reaction in the military camp? His Majesty asked. The military camp is boiling. It's almost out of control. Lang Daoyin chuckled humorlessly. Actually, it's not just the military camp. The entire Tiantang city is boiling. His Majesty pondered and said, this matter needs to be settled as soon as possible. Let's hold a public trial for Yang Buotao in Tiantang Square, in front of the Monument of Brave Souls. The rest of the people's eyes shone brightly. Brilliant plan. Qiu Jianhan. His Majesty said, you'll be in charge of arranging this. If Supreme Wind appears, it must be done without any mistakes. Yes. If there's any mistake in this public trial, this old official will bring my head to see you. Qiu Jianhan strode out. Lang Daoyin reminded him from behind, don't forget the 20 to 30 experts who suddenly appeared in Yang Buotao's residence when the assassins tried to assassinate him. Qiu Jianhan was nowhere to be seen. He only threw back a question. Do you think I'm like you? Lang Daoyin rolled his eyes, choking on his words. The entire Tiantang city had suddenly turned into an ocean of hatred on this day. Avenge the 9 Supremes Lords. Such flags could be seen everywhere. It was the same in the military camp and among the people. Everyone's expression was somber and sorrowful. The place where Yang Buotao lived was taken over and sealed off. Every house on the street where the residence was shut down. Only Yang Buotao's family was not allowed to close their doors day and night. Other than the soldiers who came and went, there was no one else to be seen on the street. Occasionally, there would be people who passed by the end of the street from afar. They would cast a glance at the place with disgust and disdain before turning to leave. The hundreds of people in the residence of Yang still had to make a living. Although there were still food reserves in the house, they still had to purchase vegetables and meat. The military would not interfere when the people of the residence of Yang came out to purchase. The steward who was in charge of purchasing walked hurriedly with his head lowered. He had always been in charge of purchasing ingredients, so he was already very familiar with the vendors in the market. Right now, all he wanted to do was buy the ingredients as soon as possible and hide in his room. However, when he arrived at the market, the steward was shocked to realize that everything was different from before. Everyone was looking at him with resentment, like they were looking at the enemy who had killed their parents. The steward had only walked a dozen steps into the market, but he was already enveloped by a strange atmosphere. It was as if he had walked into a wolf's den with his bare hands and no strength to truss a chicken. Everyone was looking at him with an ominous glint in their eyes. Those who were originally trying their best to curry favor with him and hoping to help him were all different today. Not only did they not come over to talk to him, they even looked like they wanted to beat him up. What was even more outrageous was that he could not buy any vegetables with the money he had. Not selling. Oh, you're asking about this? This is not for sale. Why are you setting up a stall if you're not selling? Yes, I set up a stall to look like I have something to do. In fact, I'm waiting to watch the show. If the vegetables are sold out, I'll have to go back. What show is there to watch? What show? Is it worth looking forward to? Someone is going to die soon, And it's going to be a horrible death. I heard it's a martial. How can I not watch such a show? There was no way to chat anymore. It was better to go to another stall. How much are you selling these vegetables? Not for sale. Why? Because I'm happy. Happy. What a strong reason. The manager had no choice but to go to another stall. How much are you selling these vegetables? Not for sale. Why? I'm not happy. Not happy? It was the same strong reason. It was fine if he was happy and not selling, but why would he not sell even if he was unhappy? The steward wanted to question him, but he forced himself to hold back. If he asked, he might be beaten up. Normally he wouldn't be afraid, but this time, forget it, he would go to another place. Your vegetables. I'm not selling them. If I sell them to you, what will I feed the pigs with when I go home? Your vegetables. This is for people to eat. It's not suitable for you to eat. Similar answers were given, each more ferocious than the last, and each more directed than the last. The steward patiently asked around and finally found someone who couldn't resist the temptation of the shining silver and wanted to make a deal. However, just as he was about to reach out to take the silver, he discovered that everyone in the market was staring at his hand with their eyes wide open. Countless eyes were focused on him. Some were looking at him with contempt, some were disdainful, some were angry that he did not want to compete, and there were even more who were furious. The man's hand suddenly retracted as if it was scalded by fire. From the eyes of those people, he could see that as long as he sold a vegetable to the Young family today, he would not be able to establish a foothold in this place for the rest of his life. He could not help but laugh dryly and retract his hand, saying, I forgot my vegetables today, they are not delicious. The manager saw that he had succeeded, but why did this guy change his mind? He immediately became anxious. How is it not delicious? Isn't it the same as before? I'm mainly afraid that you will mind. The man laughed dryly. Today, I peed in the vegetables. Cough. My son also defecated on it. If you don't mind. Chapter 248. The steward almost vomited. Wash it twice more? Fine. F***CKU. If it had been in the past, he would have slapped the person who dared to speak to him like this, but now, he really did not dare. Even if he were to vomit to death, he dared not do it in front of him. In short, the steward had been to 3 markets but he did not manage to buy a single stalk of vegetables. He returned empty-handed, but it was not as easy as when he had come. There was a sentry every few steps he took. Before he had even taken a few steps, the steward had already been searched everywhere on his body, not letting go of any hidden spots. After this round of searching, he would be met with another wave of searches every few steps he took. Again, all the hidden spots on his body were searched. They wanted to see if there was any news. What if the search was not thorough and they missed it? Those hidden spots were the main targets of the search. They could not be let go. By the time the steward returned to the residence of Young, it was already the 4th hour of the night. The search along the way had almost cost him half his life. Even the gaps of his nails had been searched. Where else could he not find? There was also that, a broken anus, a body full of wounds. It was not fake at all. In the inner yard of the residence of Yang Buitao looked as calm as ever on the surface, but in reality, his heart was in a state of turmoil, and he couldn't calm down in the slightest. Surrounding him were the Four Seasons Tower's experts who had used various identities to sneak in. There were more than 20 of them. However, even though there were many people, it was peaceful and calm. To these people, the matter before them was only a trivial matter. Whether they succeeded or failed, it was insignificant. However, the significance of the current matter to Yang Buitao was very different. Yang Buitao, as a Yutong's man, had been born and raised in Yutong, built a family, built a career, and built a meritorious service. It had not been easy for him to come this far. It had only been a few days, but Yang Buitao had suddenly realized that what he had painstakingly built and fought for his entire life was about to be destroyed. The source of all this was because he had thought that he had done it carefully, a secret that no one would ever know about. His current feelings were indescribable and indescribable. Looking at the indifferent faces of the Four Seasons Tower's experts around him, Yang Buitao was exasperated. Of course, you don't have to care. You can just leave this place and return to the martial world. The 4 corners of the world are your home. Anyway, you've gotten used to such a life. But me? Does anyone spare a thought for me? Marshal, Madam invites you. A pretty little maid walked over timidly. Yang Buotao coughed and said, Did Madam say what happened? I still have important matters to attend to. If there's nothing important, we'll talk later. For some reason at this moment, Yang Buotao suddenly felt flustered and afraid to face the person who he had slept with for several decades. He was clearly bored to death, but he didn't dare to say it out loud, and he didn't dare to face her. Madam seems to have something important to discuss with Marshal. Marshal, please come over as soon as possible, the little maid said. Tell Madam that I'll be there soon. Yang Buotao paced back and forth, muttering to himself for a long while. Finally he sighed and said, Everyone, please wait here for a moment. I'll be right back. A green-robed old man who was the leader said with a smile, Marshal, please do as you please. Yang Buotao nodded and strode away. Madam is looking for me? Yang Buotao followed her into the bedroom. This was the most private space in the entire Yang mansion. Usually, the only people who could enter this room were the husband, wife, and a personal maid who was in charge of cleaning and tidying the room. But now, in this private space, there was a small table in front of the bed. There were 4 dishes, a pot of wine, 2 wine cups, and 2 sets of chopsticks on it. I don't know why, but I'm suddenly in the mood to have a drink with my husband tonight. Yang Buotao's wife was the daughter of an official. Although she was already in her 40s, she still had a slim figure and was as beautiful as a flower. For Yang Buotao to have such a wife made others envious. It could be said to be a trivial matter and a topic of conversation. I didn't expect Madam to have such a refined interest. I'll have a drink with Madam. Yang Buotao laughed heartily and seemed to be in high spirits. He sat down and smelled the aroma of the dishes. His face was intoxicated. Madam's dishes are getting better and better. Eat more if you think it's good. Madame Yang sat opposite and raised her wine cup. She looked at Yang Buotao lovingly. My husband, please. Madam, please. Yang Buotao laughed heartily and drank the wine in his cup. He looked very cheerful and carefree, much more relaxed than his usual dignified appearance. However, he had completely concealed all of his negative emotions. Madame Yang covered her face with her sleeves and drank the wine in her cup slowly. As she drank, her eyes stared at Yang Buotao's face without blinking. Why are you looking at me like that? Yang Buotao smiled. Do you think I'm old? Madame Yang smiled gently. My husband is in his prime. How can you say that? But I looked at the moon last night and suddenly remembered that it has been 27 years since I married into the Yang family. Yang Buotao sighed unnoticeably. 27 years. So it has been that long. Since ancient times, beauties were like famous generals. They were not allowed to see their hair turn white. Be it beauties or famous generals, the merciless years were their biggest enemies that they could not fight against. This time, Madame Yang looked out of the window and said slowly, It doesn't seem to be easy? Yang Buotao shuddered and said, Don't worry, madam. This incident is just a misunderstanding. Once everything is cleared up, everything will be settled and everything will return to normal. You don't have to worry about it. Madame Yang turned around slowly and looked at Yang Buotao's face gently, trying to catch his gaze. However, Yang Buotao's gaze only met hers once before he looked away and raised his wine cup for the second time. I know it's true. Madame Yang said, You and I have slept together for so many years. I know your habits. You will look away the moment you feel guilty. Especially when you're facing me. Yang Buotao remained silent and did not reply for a long time. Since the year before last, your temper has been weird and getting worse. You would always go out for a walk alone in the middle of the night, Madame Yang said. I knew then that something was wrong with you. Last year, when the 9 Supremes Lords were ambushed, you became more and more abnormal. Initially, I thought you were worried because of the 9 Supremes Lords' unfortunate demise and Yutong's fortune. However, when you personally killed the old dog that you had reared for more than a decade, I vaguely felt that things weren't as simple as they seemed. Later on, you would often wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat. It only showed your abnormality. Madame Yang said quietly, I know something is wrong with you, but I won't ask if you don't want to talk about it. You're a man. You should have some space for yourself. I believe you won't hide anything from me if you can tell me. Previously, I was still naively fantasizing that you would definitely be able to tide through it on your own and adjust yourself very quickly. Mistress Yang smiled sadly. That's why I've been waiting all this while, waiting for you to tide through it and then tell me about this journey of yours. I didn't expect that I would wait for this day and that what I've waited for is such a terrifying news. Is my sky going to fall? Madame Yang shook her head and sighed. Husband, why is this so? Tell me, I want to know. Yang Butao sat like a statue, motionless and silent for a long time. Since Madame Yang began to speak, he had not moved. However, his face grew paler and paler. When he heard the question, Yang Butao shuddered involuntarily. Husband is a native of Yutong. The blood of Yutong flows in your veins. Since enlisting in the military, you've been on the battlefield for a long time, you've been through hundreds of battles. All the way until now, you're already second only to one and above tens of thousands of people. You can be said to be at the pinnacle of being a vassal. On the battlefield, you're the marshal of an army. With one command, millions of soldiers can die without regret. Madame Yang's voice was calm. I know how much you've suffered for the Empire of Yutong. How much you've suffered. There are a total of 135 scars on your body. For so many years, he has done his best to protect the country and fought on the battlefield. He has never fallen behind. My husband is a good man of steel. A loyal vassal of the Empire of Yutong. I'm absolutely sure of this. But it's also because of this that I'm even more puzzled. Since my husband is such a hero who deserves to leave his name in history, why would he do such a thing? Madame Yang's voice had been calm. When she finished her last sentence, she lifted her head slowly, her clear eyes looking at Yang Butao without blinking. She said slowly, "Why would you plot against the 9 Supremes? Tell me." When she said the last 3 words, Madame Yang's tone that had always been flat turned into a high-pitched one. Cold sweat broke out on Yang Butao's forehead. Tell me, 2.5 years ago, every time we talked about military affairs, you would always talk about the 9 Supremes. From the beginning, it was those little fellows, but slowly, it became the 9 Supremes Lords. It was all an indication of your great recognition of the 9 Supremes Lords. Speaking of the 9 Supremes, you were eloquent and long-winded back then, especially that time when you fell into an ambush and the 9 Supremes appeared to save you, saving the army from defeat. You promised solemnly that as long as you were alive, it would be the time to repay them. Madame Yang said, but I don't know when it started, but you stopped talking about the 9 Supremes. You didn't talk about anything else at the dining table either. As time went by, you haven't heard the 2 words 9 Supremes from your mouth for 2 years. The muscles on Yang Butao's face twitched and spasmed, sweat dripping from his body. His expression grew paler, almost drained of color. Chapter 249. Madame Yang replied calmly, "Half a year ago, I had already arranged for my youngest son, Yang Qin, to go to his maternal grandfather's house. You've even asked why he hasn't returned yet. 1,000 miles is not considered far. I can answer my husband's question now. Qin won't be coming back. He didn't go to his maternal grandfather's house. Instead, he entered a sect and became a disciple of a sect. This is my arrangement. At that time, I was afraid that you wouldn't agree, so I didn't tell you the truth. I only hoped that one day, when Qin's cultivation was successful, he would come back and tell you everything. Now, it seems, everything was a lucky hit, and your Yang family has left behind a little bloodline. As the daughter-in-law of the Yang family, this is also something that I have done for your family." Phew! Yang Butao let out a long sigh, as if he had put down a huge stone in his heart. He said gratefully, "Thank you, my good wife." Mistress Yang looked at Yang Butao and said, "Even now, you still don't want to tell me the reason?" Yang Butao took a deep breath, as if he wanted to say something, but he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. He said, "Madam doesn't need to know about this. Just take it that I—" Yang Butao's heart was suddenly blinded by lard and possessed by a ghost. His eyes were filled with anguish as he said, "I, Yang Butao, have let down the 9 Supremes first in my life. Letting down you, my wife, is the second." He stood up and stared at his wife. Suddenly, he knelt down and said, "My wife, I'm sorry." The tears that Mrs. Yang was trying her best to hold back finally flowed out. Even at this point, he still refused to speak. Yang Butao slowly stood up and walked out without looking back. Yang Butao knew that there was no turning back for him. There was no turning back for him since a long time ago. Mistress Yang's tears streamed down her cheeks. After a long time she said, "Forget it. If you don't want to say it, then don't say it. If I say it, I'll die too. If I don't, I'll still die. There's nothing wrong with being a muddle-headed ghost. There's no need for humans to understand everything." She picked up a cup of wine and slowly drank it. She murmured, "I wanted to poison this wine and end it all, but, in the end I couldn't bring myself to do it. Forget it. On the day of the public trial, let's go to the underworld together." The night was dark, and the wind was howling in the horizon. The wind seemed to be getting stronger and stronger. The cold wind whistled through the air, stirring up a sharp sound. It was as if thousands of ghosts were coming out at the same time, causing one's scalp to explode involuntarily. Countless people in Tiantang City were waiting for daybreak. When the sun rises, the truth will be revealed. Taizheng was an exception. He had gone to bed early, snoring loudly as he slept soundly like a dead pig. However, when the fourth night watch had passed, he woke up abruptly, scaring his wife who was beside him. "Why so early? Something big happened today. Recover your energy and wake up early to prepare." Tai Zheng's upper body was bare as he sprung up. The cold wind blew on his bare chest and on his face. He shuddered, the remaining drowsiness vanishing without a trace. Tai Zheng used the cold well water to wash his face and put on his robe swiftly. After wiping his face carelessly, he said, "Mistress, I am going to work." Without waiting for his wife's reply, he strode out. His wife, who was draped in a robe, leaned against the door. She vaguely felt that Tai Zheng was not quite himself today. It was only a court session as usual. Was there a need to be so valiant, as if he was about to fight a decisive battle? Yes, court session. However, Tai Zheng had a sword at his waist, a breastplate hanging on his chest. He was clad in armor, and his bodyguard behind him was helping him carry the glaive. How was this a court session? It was obviously a fight to the death. Just as she thought about it, she could not help covering her mouth in shock. Just as she was about to chase after him to ask, she realized that Tai Zheng had already disappeared around the corner. He was gone. At this moment, Tiantang Square was already crowded with people. A towering flag stood in the center. This flag was at least 200 feet tall, and the blood-red flag was fluttering in the air. Below the flag, there was a high platform. This platform was the main venue for the public trial. However, the public trial this time, all the higher-ups knew that this so-called public trial was only a pretense. Whether it was Yutong's higher-ups or the Four Seasons Tower side, they were all waiting for one person to show up. Whether the crime was proven or not, it did not depend on the evidence, but whether the person showed up or not. If Supreme Wind showed up, then Yang Buotao would be guilty and unpardonable. If Supreme Wind did not show up, then Yang Buotao would be innocent. All his crimes would be cleared and he would be safe and sound. Other witnesses and material evidence would not count. The sun was high up in the sky, its rays shining on the earth. The 5 main judges had all arrived. Yang Buotao, who was directly involved in the case, had also arrived to await his trial. Yang Buotao did not bring many people with him. There were less than 30 of them. They were all dressed in military uniforms, but the aura they exuded was enough to make Qiu Jianhan and the other bigwigs take a few more glances. This group of people had a domineering aura that was completely different from that of the military. It was clear to everyone that this group of people was not simple. They were not to be underestimated. Old Marshal Qiu snorted and said, "Marshal Yang, there are quite a number of experts among your bodyguards. Even this old man doesn't know if I should be envious or jealous when I see them." Yang Buotao's face was pale, looking rather absent-minded. He only hummed in response to old Marshal Qiu's harsh words, as if he did not hear what he said clearly. He did not offer any explanation or rebuttal. His back that had been as straight as a pine tree was obviously hunched. Tai Zheng had been paying attention to Yang Buotao's every movement and word since the moment he had arrived. His heart skipped a beat. It had only been one night, but Yang Buotao seemed to have aged 20 years in an instant. Had there been some other unforeseen event? When Tai Zheng heard old Qiu's sarcastic words that sounded like praise but were actually derogatory, he paid even more attention to Yang Buotao's actions. He had thought that the latter would defend himself endlessly, such as how he had been a marshal all his life, loyal and courageous, receiving the help of many righteous men. There was nothing strange about it. If Yang Buotao had said so, Tai Zheng would definitely have rushed over. Even if he did not fight, he would have spat on his face. However, Yang Buotao's actions were too unusual. Tai Zheng did not know what to do, so he sat down quietly. It was not only old Marshal Qiu and Tai Zheng who were paying attention to Yang Buotao, but everyone else who was present had their gazes focused on him. Facing the sword-like gazes from all directions, Yang Buotao lowered his eyelids. He did not speak nor move, his expression dull like a wooden sculpture. Among the group of people who had followed him here, there were 2 people who had always stood behind him, while the others had quietly dispersing into the crowd without leaving a trace. They seemed to be moving casually, but in reality, they had faintly formed an encirclement. It was a large circle. Yang Buotao sat there with his eyes closed, his expression as dark as still water. He was shocked by a sentence that he had been thinking about for a long time. Why? It was his wife, a question that was filled with doubt and incomprehension. Why? Yang Buotao was also asking the same question in his heart. However, there was only a bitter smile on his face. He had nothing to say to it. He had no heart to answer. He had come out today only to wait for this result. If Supreme Wind were to appear, it would be the final verdict. No matter how he refuted it, no matter how perfect the evidence was, it would be futile. If Supreme Wind did not appear. If he did not appear, Yang Buotao could not think of any reason why Supreme Wind would not appear. The 9 Supremes had never needed so many taboos in their actions. There was only what they should and should not do. In the past, Yutong's wars had been fraught with danger. There were countless battles where the situation was precarious. However, no matter how dangerous the war was, as long as they could make it in time, the 9 Supremes would definitely come to their aid. They had never cared about the so-called danger, only whether they should or should not do it. Actually, even if Supreme Wind did not come, what could he change? His act of treason and collusion with the enemy had long been settled in the hearts of Yutong's higher-ups. Whether Supreme Wind would appear or not, parting with his wife this morning would be a farewell forever. His wife would not wait for him to return. Thinking of this, Yang Buotao felt a throbbing pain in his heart. The high platform was surrounded by fully armed soldiers who were guarding the stability of the platform. Further out, there were troops who stood solemnly, forming the second line of defense. Then, there were the ordinary citizens who came to watch. However, the number of people who came to watch today was unusually large. It was a sea of people, with no end in sight. Everyone present was waiting. In the palace, His Majesty the Emperor was waiting. In the residence of Grand Commandant, Old Grand Commandant was waiting. In the sky, there were other existences who were waiting as well. Yang Buotao and his guards and experts were waiting as well. By His Majesty the Emperor's order, a public hearing will be held here regarding the case of Supreme Wind, one of the 9 Supremes, accusing Yutong's northern troop marshal, Yang Buotao, of colluding with the enemy and framing. Lang Daoyin's voice was like the clanging of metal. This concerns the fate of the nation. The world must bear witness. Do not let injustice go unpunished, do not let the souls of the heroes rest in their graves. Lead Yang Buotao. Lang Daoyin hollered. Yang Buotao stood up slowly. The corners of his lips curled into a smile that no one knew what it meant as he strode up to the stage. Only Yang Buotao stood up on the high platform. There was nothing in front of him. Only emptiness. Everyone was waiting. If Supreme Wind were to appear to testify, then this should be the moment. Anyone with a discerning eye would know that this was a setup. It was not targeted at Yang Buotao, but at Supreme Wind, or perhaps the surviving members of the 9 Supremes. If Supreme Wind were to appear, then Yang Buotao would have to die. There was no room for negotiation. However, Supreme Wind would have to bear a great crisis. Other than Yutong, the whole world viewed the 9 Supremes as the root of the world's calamity, eager to get rid of them. If Supreme Wind did not appear, then the public hearing against Yang Buotao would change. There would be countless pieces of evidence to prove that he was wrongly accused. Similarly, the public could not accept the fact that a meritorious minister was wrongly accused. The former had the Shangguan family of generals incident. If the accusation were to be reversed today, then Yang Buotao's reputation and power in Yutong would rise to a whole new level. No matter how the higher-ups viewed it, they would not be able to do anything to him in the near future. Everyone's attention was on them, waiting quietly to see how Supreme Wind would choose to deal with this difficult situation. Would he step forward to expose the traitor's mask and face the unpredictable crisis head-on? Or would he preserve his useful body and wait for another day to come? Time passed slowly, but Supreme Wind did not appear. Gradually, whispers could be heard from below the stage. Tai Zhang was dressed in martial attire, his left hand on the hilt of his sword while his right hand held onto his glaive, staring at the high platform like a tiger watching its prey. However, there was no movement from the other side. Tai Zheng's heart was beating like a drum. He believed in what Supreme Wind had said, that Yang Buotao must be the traitor, the one who had betrayed the 9 Supremes. However, it was not enough for him to believe in this matter. The public hearing must have sufficient credibility. Only Supreme Wind's appearance could settle the matter. Everything else was as fleeting as the clouds. On the high platform, old Marshal Qiu Jianhan gazed afar, his expression carefree. "Are you coming or not?" After a while, whoosh whoosh, someone cried out in surprise, "The wind is here. The wind is stronger." Chapter 250. Indeed, the howling northern wind had suddenly grown several times stronger. The flags of the 3 armies fluttered at the same time, adding to the grandeur of the scene. Countless people's expressions changed because of this. Some revealed expressions of joy, some revealed expressions of worry, and there were also expressions of emotions. In the depths of the crowd, there was a small group of people whose expressions did not change, but their gazes shone brightly, and a sharp glint could be faintly seen. Indeed, Qiu Jianhan stood against the wind, his gaze filled with nostalgia. The sound of the wind grew stronger and stronger. His Majesty, who had been waiting with his head lowered, lifted his head abruptly and stood up agitatedly. Yang Buotao's eyes slowly closed. He had come. He had come after all. I'm done for when he comes. This was something that he had been mentally prepared for, but when it really came, the last bit of luck he had was shattered. All the experts of the 4 Seasons Tower were not bothered with Yang Buotao's emotions. All of them were fully focused, secretly linking their deific consciousness together, covering almost the entire Tiantang Square. Get ready! The wind rose, sweeping away the clouds. The clouds in the sky rippled, moving from the top of their heads to the other end of the sky. The sky was clear, cloudless for thousands of miles. It was filled with the radiant light of dawn, illuminating the universe. The crowd cheered in Tiantang Square. It was the voice of the people. Lord Supreme Wind! Lord Supreme Wind! The deafening cheers continued to resound, many people's eyes brimming with tears. One would not know how to cherish something if one had never lost it. This saying could be used in any situation. When the 9 Supremes were still around, when they were still contributing to the empire, when they were still fighting on the battlefield, everyone respected and revered them, knowing that there were 9 heroes. They were Yutong's guardian angel. However, it was only until they were gone that they truly realized what the 9 Supremes' protection had brought to Yutong. It had been more than a year since the 9 Supremes had met with mishap. War reports from all over had arrived like snowflakes. The entire empire was in a precarious state, with danger looming. Even ordinary families in Yutong had been affected. Along with the battle reports, there were also death notices. If the battle reports from all 4 sides were continuous snowflakes, the countless death notices would be a more violent blizzard. The Empire of Yutong was a nation that benefited from its military and was surrounded by enemies all over the world. The number of Yutong citizens who did not serve in the military was less than 11. Some families with a lot of men could easily send 7 or 8 men out. Every time the military subordinates started to distribute the list of the dead and distribute the compensation items, everyone would stretch their necks and wait anxiously. He was afraid that his name would be called, because once it was called, it would mean that one of his relatives had sacrificed his life for the country. However, this kind of waiting and worry had to wait until all the names were read out. Only after confirming that there were no more enemies could he truly be at ease. Then he would comfort those who were crying bitterly and go back to wait for the next batch of battle reports. Another round of waiting, another round of torment. Almost everyone had noticed the unprecedented frequency of the battle reports and the sudden increase in the number of deaths in the past year. Originally, when they were together, they would only say, "Have you heard?" in a very coincidental situation. It was said that someone's son from the neighboring village had died there. Then they would shake their heads and sigh, going about their own business, not hearing any similar news for a long time. However, this was not the case this year. Over the past year, There would be a batch of battle reports every once in a while. The people around him, the people he had met, the people in his neighborhood, the people he had seen with his own eyes. The countless lives he had seen with his own eyes had all turned into a piece of paper, never to be seen again. There were just too many of them. There was a family of 7 brothers who had joined the army to guard the land together. The family had only received a letter from the brothers 2 years ago. It was to report that all 7 brothers were alive and well. However, since last year, it had been basically once a month. Up until now, the family had already received 6 death notices. The poor old lady had already cried herself to death. The mountain people who could not even read a word clearly recognized this. The 9 Supremes. Yutong with the 9 Supremes and without the 9 Supremes was completely different. Previously, with the existence of the 9 Supremes, everyone could live and work in peace. Although it was still dangerous for their loved ones to join the army, it did not matter. They could just treat it as a long journey. They would come back one day. When they came back, it would be a family reunion. There were only so many casualties in a year. How could it be so unlucky as to fall on my family? On this point, it had almost become a common understanding. However, without the 9 Supremes now, every family who sent their children off to war felt the heartache of parting in life and death. Being and not being were 2 different things. As time passed, as the battles grew more frequent and intense, as the country's situation grew more precarious, as more and more people received death notices, everyone was reminiscing about the time when the 9 Supremes still existed. More and more people began to think, if the 9 Supremes Lords were still here, how could Yutong have suffered such a great defeat? So many soldiers had perished. If the 9 Supremes Lords were still here, my son wouldn't have died. If the 9 Supremes Lords were still here. Tai Zheng's battle at Tianxian Cliff had brought back news that there might still be someone alive among the 9 Supremes. The entire nation was in an uproar, but after such a long time, there had been no more accurate news. This made the people hesitate and disappointed. There were even more people who had new thoughts. Perhaps it was a ploy by the higher-ups to reassure the people. Today, however, they could finally see the 9 Supremes Lords with their own eyes. There were still people alive among the 9 Supremes Lords. At this moment, the wind blew in Yutong. No one could understand the agitation in the hearts of Yutong's people. The people were united, anticipating the reappearance of the 9 Supremes Lords to protect Yutong. The wind howled, gradually turning into a gigantic tornado in the air. It spun rapidly above Tiantang Square. It grew lower and lower. With a long howl, a black silhouette flashed in the air, turning into the image of a person dressed in black, with a black mask covering his face. The person landed lightly on the 200 feet tall flagpole, standing on one leg, his robe fluttering as he looked down. Qiu Jianhan gazed afar, meeting the pair of eyes from afar. His heart skipped a beat. How much desolation and solitude, how much desolation and hatred were contained in those eyes. He had come. Despite the sea of people below him and the tsunami-like cheers, he stood on the flagpole. His tall and straight body was like a sharp sword that pierced the heavens. However, he did not come down. Qiu Jianhan strode out and cupped his fists from afar. Is it Lord Supreme Wind who has arrived? Above the sky, the person in black on the flagpole raised his hand. Supreme Wind's medallion was in sight. Without waiting for Qiu Jianhan to speak, Supreme Wind sneered coldly and said, 9 Heavens Dictum, residents of 9 Supremes, the wind has come today to settle the feud. On the other side, the residents of 9 Supremes that was still vaguely visible suddenly shook without warning. 9 rainbows shot out abruptly. They soared straight into the sky. Red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, purple, white, and black. The 9 rainbows circled above the blue sky like they were alive, soaring higher and higher like dragons. Slowly, they rose to a height that could not be seen by the naked eye and disappeared. Was this a miracle? Or was it a miracle? It could not be faked, nor could it be replicated. Lord Supreme Wind. It's really Lord Supreme Wind who has reappeared. The entire Tiantang city was in an uproar. When the wind had changed, the people in the square had already sensed it and were delighted. When the silhouette appeared in the wind, Tiantang Square had turned into a sea of joy. Supreme Wind had appeared. He had reappeared in Yutong. There was no need for him to prove his identity. He had only come in the form of the wind and waved his arm. The people were already united and had no more doubts. Furthermore, The residents of 9 Supremes had responded immediately, further proving that Supreme Wind's identity was beyond doubt. There were many soldiers who had never shed a tear in half of their lives, but their eyes were brimming with tears now. The invincible 9 Supremes lords had finally reappeared today. At the same time, 3 strong deific consciousnesses met in the air. What's going on? The silhouette is definitely there. Why can't we control it? I can't lock it down here as well. The silhouette looks real, but it's actually illusory. I can't grasp it. It's the same on my side. The wind is formless, but it leaves a trace wherever it passes. How can it be so illusory? A minute, what's going on? As the 3 deific consciousnesses met and separated, they made their decision swiftly. The silhouette that had appeared stood on top of the flagpole, his voice bleak and desolate. During the battle at Tianxian Cliff that day, my 808 brothers were trapped in a tight encirclement and had to die. Until now, I can still remember their voices and smiles, as if they were right in front of me. Yang Butao, can you tell me why? The battle at Tianxian Cliff. The 9 Supremes had led 800 warriors to be ambushed because they had rushed to the rescue. Who could forget the bloodbath of the heavens? Speaking of this battle, not only was it unforgettable, it was also the most heart-wrenching battle for the people of Yutong in the last 100 years. It was even more painful than the battle where the 3 marshals of the Shangguan family of generals had perished at the hands of Chongqing Path. It was in this battle that the Empire of Yutong had lost the 9 Supremes. The Empire of Yutong had recently been faced with countless impending battles that could not be reversed. It was because of this that countless of Yutong's men had perished. Whether it was for public or private reasons, for the nation or for the people, there was no one in Yutong who did not hate them. They hated those who plotted, they hated those who ambushed, and they hated those who killed. However, the people whom Yutong, including the emperor, hated the most were not the murderers who had killed the 9 Supremes. It was the people who had betrayed the 9 Supremes behind their backs. Everyone wanted to ask, as a citizen of Yutong, why did you do this? Those who were not from the Empire of Yutong were Yutong's enemies. They hated the 9 Supremes and had even set up layers of schemes and traps to target the 9 Supremes. Even if they had resorted to every conceivable means, it was hard to blame them. However, as a citizen of Yutong, why did you do this? Today, at this moment, at this place, this person had appeared and was personally questioned by one of the 9 Supremes, Supreme Wind. He had voiced everyone's question, why? Chapter 251. If looks could kill, then Yang Butao would have already been minced into 1,000 pieces and dismembered. Yang Butao's face was ashen, but he was no better than a dead man. Since the moment Supreme Wind had appeared, he knew that he was done for. Any hope he had was in vain. Supreme Wind would rather put himself in danger in order to kill him first. Such staunchness and uncompromising attitude were eye-catching. Heroic and heroic, with no regrets in their hearts. Whatever they want to do, whatever they must do, that has always been the case. Why? I have nothing to say. Yang Butao sucked in a soft breath and chuckled bitterly. Lifting his head to look at Supreme Wind, who was on top of the flagpole, he said hoarsely, I know that an apology can hardly mean anything, but I still have to say it. I'm sorry. A cold smile hung on his face behind the mask. The lives of 808 brothers. An apology? You're sorry, is really amazing. Yang Butao, you've been blessed by the emperor. You joined the army when you were young, fighting on the battlefield, going through hundreds of battles and achieving the rank of marshal. These are all facts, they can't be erased, and I have no intention of doing so. Supreme Wind's voice carried a sonorous tone amidst the chilly wind. I wonder if Marshal Yang still remembers the saying that has been passed down in Yutong's army for years. Live as Yutong's man, die as Yutong's soul. Below, there was only silence. All the soldiers had a calm look on their faces. I'm not willing to erase Marshal Yang's past achievements because I believe that Marshal Yang has carried out this saying before. Supreme Wind's tone was thick with confusion. But it's because of this that I'm even more puzzled. Why? No matter how you look at it, you have no reason to betray us. How can a mere apology be enough to end this karma? Yang Butao chuckled bitterly. Other than being sorry, I have nothing else to say. I have nothing else to explain to Lord Supreme Wind. He took a deep breath. Standing up, he said loudly, since it has come to this today, any excuses are meaningless. I'm a man, I dare to take responsibility for what I've done. I was the one who did what happened back then. Yang Buotao hadn't finished speaking when curses and curses sounded out from below, and words of resentment rose and fell without end. Yang Buotao wanted to continue, but a voice suddenly hollered, "Do it!" His voice was still ringing in his ears when 3 silhouettes that were faster than lightning leaped up from 3 different directions, heading straight for Supreme Wind, who was on the flagpole. On the high platform, 2 faint silhouettes flew up as well, hollering, "How dare you, you scoundrel!" At the same time, there were dozens of people who suddenly rushed towards the high platform like ferocious tigers. These people were originally scattered in all directions. This action, other than being impressive, also affected the surrounding commoners who were rushing towards the high platform. The commoners who bore the brunt of these people's powerful impact were either knocked away, injured in the sinews or bones, or killed in the most serious cases. The number of casualties was great. Tai Zhang, who had been paying attention to the stage, roared, raising his 24-feet-long saber as he rushed over. Yang Buotao, with his eyes were red. The soldiers of the 3 armies who were also on guard moved at the same time, responding immediately. Yun Yang stood on the flagpole, facing attacks from all directions, but he was unfazed. He had a plan for coming here today. There was no doubt that he would encounter danger here. There was no doubt that he would encounter danger to his life, however. When he confirmed that the public trial would be held in Tiantang Square, he was even more certain of what was going on. Even if the Four Seasons Tower's forces could set up layers of traps under the stage, as long as he was on the flagpole and had made preparations beforehand, the enemy would not be able to do anything to him, no matter how many tricks they had up their sleeves. As long as he did not land on his own, everything would be fine. Life and death would not be involved. Initially, everything was within his calculations, but when he saw Yang Buotao bear all the blame so readily, Yun Yang could not help but sigh. It looked like his plan to use Yang Buotao's momentum to drag Jiang Zhong and Fu Baoguo out together was going to be in vain. Yun Yang could see clearly that when Yang Buotao stood up, he was already looking like he was ready to die. With his demeanor, he was most likely going to commit suicide right after he was done speaking, cutting off all clues. This was not an outcome that Yun Yang was happy to see. This way, he would lose the possibility of pursuing the other traitors head-on. What happened next, however, was beyond Yun Yang's expectations. With Yang Buotao's death, the investigation of the traitors had come to an end, and the protection of the other traitors was in line with the Four Seasons Tower's interests. However, the Four Seasons Tower's men had acted ahead of time, surrounding Yun Yang from all directions to ambush him. Yun Yang's thoughts raced, his mind jolting. How could this be? Has the Four Seasons Tower still not given up on Yang Buotao? Before Yun Yang could think about it, the 3 silhouettes who had attacked first had already arrived at lightning speed. Yun Yang snorted. His illusory silhouette struck out with his saber, and a dazzling saber gleam appeared out of nowhere. The divine edge struck. 1 style, 2 styles, struck at the same time. The saber was merciless, the ultimate saber was chilling, beheading the enemy. The Tao was merciless, heaven's reincarnation, who would the heavens spare? 2 rays of saber light spilled out, engulfing the incoming enemies. The 3 silhouettes who were the first to pounce had cold glints in their hands. They did not evade, but attacked head-on. It was obvious that the 3 of them did not take Yun Yang's strike seriously at all. They intended to break it and win, then kill Supreme Wind of the 9 Supremes in a single strike. However, at the next moment, the saber light that had been swiftly dispelled and even broken through, as expected, did not change at all. It maintained its original trajectory, completely ignoring the resistance that they had unleashed. The golden saber light and palm force that they had unleashed were completely ineffective, as if they did not exist at all. Only the saber light could be seen increasing in intensity. The 3 of them saw an unprecedented killing intent suddenly appearing in front of them, but they all shouted loudly in unison. Their bodies that were moving at an incredible speed were like ghosts swapping places with each other in the air. The 3 of them were in the midst of a high-speed charge in midair. It was not something that could be compared to moving on the ground. Although the 3 of them had only used shifting shadows to support each other once, their true cultivation base had already been exposed. They were pinnacle experts who possessed 10th perfection. The ability of any one of these 3 people was not inferior to Da Yuan's legend, Liang Yunqi, the Dragon of Clouds, who had perished in the residence of 9 Supremes. With such a lineup, it would be more than enough to assassinate the monarch of a country. However, They were not in a good state at the moment. There was a lot of fresh blood dripping from the three of them, as well as the pained moans from the three of them. Yun Yang's 1 style and 2 styles had successfully injured the 3 experts. He sighed inwardly as he succeeded. His 1 and 2 styles had taken advantage of the opponent's carelessness and the unparalleled sharpness of the saber in his hand, but he could only injure them and not kill them. After all, the difference in their cultivation base was too great. He had the will but not the strength. Thinking deeper, if the 3 people before him had not underestimated the enemy and had been prepared, not only would they have had the chance to avoid being injured, they would have even had the chance to counterattack. "What saber is this?" one of them blurted out. The reason why the 3 of them had failed was because of Yun Yang's divine edge, which was marvelous, but the main reason was that the divine edge was too sharp. Not only was it enough to compensate for Yun Yang's lack of cultivation base, it had also broken through the trio's mystical chi defense without any hindrance. How could the 3 of them not be shocked? They knew that this was not the time to ask questions, but they could not help asking anyway. "A saber that kills." It was not Yun Yang's reply, but the 2 elders who had charged up behind the trio. Both of them were dressed in loose robes with wide sleeves, their faces unsophisticated. They had actually interfered in between Yun Yang and the trio and attacked without any warning. The 2 of them had stopped the 4 Seasons Tower's 3 superb experts and were fighting in the air. Although the 3 superb experts from the 4 Seasons Tower were injured, their actual abilities were not greatly diminished. The 2 elders who had come later had forcefully stopped the trio. Although it was 2 against 3, they were not at a disadvantage. This at least meant that these 2 men were at least of a similar level. On the other side, the 4 Seasons Tower's men had knocked Yang Buotao out at once and carried him on their backs. However, they could not simply charge out. Putting aside the fact that Tai Zheng was already charging forward with his target locked on Yang Buotao, it was already difficult for Yutong's 4 armies to break through the encirclement. The person who had knocked Yang Buotao out had obviously planned this. Even if Yun Yang wanted to stop him, he was too far away, unable to do so. Catch! The person tossed Yang Buotao out like a whirlwind. The deicide bow archer was already on standby, but the unexpected turn of events had happened. The speed at which the opponent had tossed Yang Buotao out was too fast. Even with the deicide bow archer's reflexes, he did not manage to shoot in time. After all, the stage was surrounded by citizens. If the sniper's arrow did not work, it would definitely affect the crowd below. At this moment, Yang Buotao's body was already more than 100 feet away. His momentum gradually slowed down, but he saw a person suddenly jump out from the crowd and catch his body. Then, with a forceful push, this body of more than 200 kilograms was once again sent flying like an arrow. This time, however, Yang Buotao's luck was no longer on his side. Swoosh! A cold, black shadow flashed past as a string of blood splattered in the air. Those with better eyesight looked over and saw that it was a mystical steel arrow that had pierced through Yang Buotao's thigh. The deicide bow archers were not to be trifled with. Due to the sudden turn of events and the concern of accidentally injuring the citizens, they could not shoot at once. However, how could such an escape mode be repeated? One of the deicide bow archers who was closer fired a shot. The arrow hit, but it was a pity that it only hit the thigh and did not take his life. However, another silhouette appeared on the other side. As he caught Yang Buotao, he hurled him out once more. Tai Zheng roared and pushed the people around him away. He leaped onto the stage and howled, "Yang Buotao!" The bow in his hand was already knocked with an arrow. Looking down from above, it was a soul-chasing arrow. Chapter 252. The bow fired like a thunderbolt, the arrow like a shooting star. Tai Zheng's bow was also made from the horn of the armored rhinoceros. However, Tai Zheng was gifted. Not only was his strength astonishing, his arms were longer than an ordinary person's. His armored rhinoceros bow was made from 2 complete rhinoceros horns and the bowstring was made from double layers of mystical beast tendons. Compared to an ordinary deicide bow, its shooting range and power were many times greater. With 3 consecutive shots, Yang Buotao's silhouette had already turned into a tiny black in the sky. Tai Zheng did not hesitate to knock the bow and release the arrow. The arrow seemed to ignore the distance, vanishing in a flash. Yun Yang's eyesight was amazing. He could see blood splattering from Yang Buotao's body from afar, but the distance was still too far. He could not be sure where the arrow had hit or if it was fatal. Another person leaped high from below and hugged Yang Buotao's body this time. With a long howl, he flashed a few times in the air, avoiding the other three mystical steel arrows, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. With a single thought, Yun Yang turned into a gust of wind and vanished without a trace. Yang Buotao, where are you going? In spite of this, the battle around the stage in Tiantang Square was still in full swing. It was a fiery moment. The assistants that Yang Buotao had brought along had at least a cultivation base of the 7th peak and above. More than half of them had even reached the 9th peak. Comparing their individual cultivation base to the military's experts, their aura alone was enough to keep them in check. However, this so-called all-out suppression was only a theoretical statement. If they were to face the military head-on, especially if they were to fall into the military's encirclement, they would be engulfed by the crowd instantly. Moreover, there was a valiant general like Tai Zhang commanding the battle from the stage. The outcome had long been reversed. Don't let a single one of them escape. Deicide bow. Shoot at will. Don't miss your shots. Troops on the periphery, retreat collectively. Chase the citizens out of the square. Avoid accidental injuries as much as possible. Troops in the middle, maintain your formation, listen to my command. Those on the left advance, fight with your life. Those on the right, spear forest. Regardless of friend or foe. Those in front and behind, spear forest, regardless of friend or foe. On the high platform, Tai Zhang, who was commanding the battle from above, had already reached the point where his voice was hoarse. The tactic that Tai Zhang was commanding now was the one that the army had used against the martial world's experts. You can fly, run, jump, and fight. You have the upper hand in terms of cultivation, skills, and techniques. Under normal circumstances, I definitely can't beat you. But I can risk my life. I can die with you in my arms. I'll use my life to create an opening in your defense and drag you along with me. I dare to die, but do you dare? Besieging from all sides, sacrificing one side. The people on this side would risk their lives to tie down these experts. Then, the brothers on the other three sides would use their spears to stab themselves and the enemy to death. This was undoubtedly the cruelest way of fighting. However, it was also the most effective way to deal with experts. When experts exchanged blows, the slightest difference could lead to 1,000 miles of error. Therefore, experts were always fighting for the difference of a split second. A split second could determine life and death. Now, the soldiers in the army were using their lives as an opportunity, using their lives as a temporary restraint, forming many moments of difference. As long as any one of these moments of difference was caught, even if one was an expert, even if one's cultivation base was profound, one's body and one's life would only have one life. A few cries of agony could be heard. Those were a dozen Four Seasons Tower 7th and 8th level experts, who were pierced by the spears and completely lost the ability to resist under such an unreasonable, desperate fight. Dozens of soldiers leaped from their brothers' shoulders, brandishing their sabers, pouncing forward like dumplings. One was sent flying, kicked away, followed by another, and another. No matter how agile and timely one's reaction was, one who was already being restrained, as long as one of them was unable to send flying in time, that moment of delay would cause 5 or 6 people to press down on one of them. Following that, hundreds of spears would stab in from all directions. If there was really no gap, they would grit their teeth and tear through their comrades, wanting to stab their targets to death. This was because everyone knew very well. As long as these fallen people stood up again, all the previous sacrifices would be meaningless. All previous efforts would be wasted. Then they could only fight to the end, until the target was killed. Avenge the 9 Supremes. Annihilate the traitors. Fight to the last man. Tai Zhang hollered with his arms raised. He could see everything clearly from his vantage point on the stage. Tai Zhang did not even use his bow and arrows, throwing his weapons continuously to attack the enemy. Tai Zhang's domineering strength was on full display at this moment. Due to his vantage point, the accuracy of his attacks formed a beautiful line of attack. Due to the participation of the 4 armies, the scene was chaotic beyond words. However, the 5 people who were fighting high up in the sky had stopped fighting. While the 3 men from the Four Seasons Tower were severely injured and bleeding profusely, the other 2 men could not keep the 3 of them down. There was also Supreme Wind, who was originally standing on top of the flagpole, had disappeared without anyone noticing. The main target of this battle was gone. What else could they fight for? the battle in the sky could stop, but when the three men looked down, they knew that things were not looking good. The 27 to 28 men who had followed Yang Buotao here, other than the men who had been waiting in ambush who had disappeared, had all fallen into Yutong's 4 armies' encirclement. None of them would be able to escape. Even if they went down to help, it would be futile. They might even suffer the same fate and be sent to the netherworld. The mountains are high and the rivers are long. We shall meet again. The 3 of them spat out their last words and turned to leave. Who would have thought that just as they left the area of the flag in the sky, countless deicide magnetite arrows would come at them without a break. Fortunately, the cultivation of these 3 people was indeed not ordinary. They forcefully gathered a breath of vitality and climbed to a higher position. They walked on the void all the way, and only then did they escape the arrow rain-killing formation of the god-slaying mysterious iron arrows. With the departure of the 3 10th perfection experts, the chaotic battle in Tiantang Square gradually came to an end. There were only 7 to 8 9th peak experts who were still resisting with all their might, but they could not hold on for much longer. Other than knowing that the 3 perfection experts who were seen as their last hope had already escaped and there was no possibility of help, it was also because these soldiers had all gone mad. Cultivators who could reach the 9th peak and above were all knowledgeable people. They had traveled extensively and seen countless armies, but they had never seen an army like this. There was only one word in each of their mouths: revenge. With the abilities of 9th peak cultivators, a troop of soldiers was nothing but a joke to them. They could annihilate them with a wave of their hands. There was no possibility of them getting close, let alone engaging in close combat. However, they were now in the midst of the army. All they could see were such ordinary soldiers charging towards them with spears in their hands. They were everywhere. What should they do? They could only rely on their own cultivation base and skill to resist, counter, and evade in a small area. Against such a situation, the so-called mystical skill, skillful shifting, and leveraging force were all a joke. There was no room for them to use them. As for flying up high, it was impossible because once he did so, he would become a live target. There were thousands of deicide bows in Yutong Square that were aimed right at him. What was worse was that these soldiers were not afraid of friendly fire. They were only afraid of not getting hurt. To kill one of their own, they could charge up to 100, 500, or even 1,000 without hesitation. They only hoped to kill one of them. They had witnessed with their own eyes how one of their 9th peak mid-level expert companion was shot by arrows from the deicide bows from all directions the moment he leaped into the air. In the blink of an eye, he was turned into a human-shaped hedgehog, covered from head to toe in arrows. Although the rain of arrows had cost Yutong's military 20 to 30 lives, no one was moved. No one was moved. "Avenge the 9 Supreme's lords!" a soldier cried out shrilly, leaping up and diving down from high above. The 9th peak expert narrowed his eyes and swung his saber at lightning speed. As expected, he easily chopped off the soldier's arms. The expert was about to swing his saber again to chop off the soldier's head when the armless soldier unexpectedly lowered his head, opened his mouth wide, and bit down viciously. He actually used his own teeth to bite the blade that was tempered 100 times. While the 9th peak expert had fought many formidable enemies, he had never faced such a ferocious enemy before. His heart skipped a beat, but he did not hesitate at all. With a clang, the tip of his saber touched the soldier's teeth. There was a soft sound of impact before the saber slid through. The armless soldier's unexpected ferocious attack had only managed to buy a short gap that could not even be considered as time. In spite of this, there were already 5 to 6 soldiers who had taken the opportunity to pounce forward. The hundreds of people around them shouted in unison, "Revenge! Revenge!" Hundreds of spears stabbed in at the same time. The 9th peak expert knew that it was too late to dodge and that it was too late for him to defend himself with his spinning blade. All he could do was muster his cultivation base and retaliate forcefully. Even though he managed to send the 5 or 6 soldiers flying and evade the spears around him, he still staggered backward from the impact. Just as he retreated, more spears stabbed at him from the side. Then, no matter how hard the expert of the 9th peak tried to defend himself, he still perished under the endless human wave tactic. The battle had only lasted for about the time it took to brew a pot of tea. The 27 to 28 people that Yang Buotao had brought with him had all died beneath the stage without exception. Among them, the furthest that had charged out was only 2,000 feet away. Tai Zheng limped over, his face drenched in blood. Tai Zheng was not supposed to be injured, but the 9th peak expert who had held on until the end was too powerful. Tai Zheng had joined in the battle. Although he had successfully killed the man, he had paid a hefty price. His waist and thighs had been stabbed more than a dozen times. There were also accidental injuries from his own men. Tai Zheng's buttocks and thighs had been hit more than a dozen times. Although his anus had not been mutilated, he was covered in wounds. Marshal Tai had almost died along with him. Chapter 253. It was not only Tai Zheng. Even old Marshal Qiu Jianhan and Leng Daoyin were covered in blood. How could the two old generals miss such a battle? In fact, it was thanks to their extraordinary cultivation base that each of them had managed to fend off an expert from the enemy. It was also because of their experience commanding that the situation of the battle was even more favorable, finally annihilating all of the Four Seasons Tower's experts. Count the casualties and losses. Tai Zheng's expression was grim. These ambushers were all dead, but Yang Buotao's fate was unknown. From the fact that he had been rescued, the outcome of the public trial could be considered a failure. Moreover, the number of casualties today was going to be a shocking one. Casualties. After a long time, an assistant general rubbed his eyes and said in a low voice, 6,342 brothers who died in the battle. Among them, Wan Fenggue, Wang Dezhu, Wei Dexu. The three generals have all perished. In addition, the muscles on Tai Zheng's face twitched. How many enemies? 28 of them killed. 28 of them. The muscles on Tai Zheng's face were twitching madly. Just these 28 people took away 6,342 of my brothers? He turned his head slowly and looked at the bloodied faces around him. For a moment, his heart was heavy. He had only been focused on annihilating the enemy earlier and had not thought about the casualties on his side. Although Tai Zheng had expected the heavy casualties on his side, he was still pained when he heard that they had actually suffered such a heavy loss. Marshal Tai. This humble officer thinks that even if the brothers who died in this battle, they will feel gratified. Their deaths will be worth it. A fellow who had lost an arm and an ear stood up with all his might. The injured brothers will also feel that it's worth it. Gratifying. Around them, countless wounded soldiers cheered in unison. That's right. Worth it. Gratifying. Because we have done something for the 9 Supremes Lords after all. The soldiers looked solemn. Before this, it has always been the 9 Supremes Lords who have shielded us from the wind and rain, saving us from danger and death. We have never done our part for the 9 Supremes Lords. Now that we're facing their enemies, we're willing to put our lives on the line no matter how hard we fight. Tai Zheng heaved a long sigh towards the sky. Suddenly, he laughed with tears in his eyes. 9 Supremes Lords, our brothers have avenged all of you. Do you see this? Qiu Jianhan was panting heavily when he saw a guard rushing in. He called out to him. What happened? This guard was the person that he had left behind to pass on the news. Why would he come in such a hurry? Could it be that something had happened? The guard said anxiously. The fire in Yang Buotao's residence was so intense that it couldn't be extinguished. It was Madame Yang who poured all the kerosene in the residence onto the blankets and other things. The entire Yang residence, 71 people, none of them survived. Qiu Jianhan shuddered while Tai Zheng turned abruptly as well, looking at the guard with a complicated expression. Madame Yang must have gathered everyone beforehand and drank the poison. The guard was a little frightened. There was only a parcel pressed against a rock in the courtyard. Inside is a letter. The guard presented a letter with both hands. There were a few delicate words on it. To old Marshal Qiu. Qiu Jianhan's eyes were rimmed with tears as he accepted it with trembling hands. He tore the seal off and unfolded it. Uncle, this niece bids farewell today. This niece has been the wife of a hero for half my life. It's enough. I don't think that I've embarrassed my parents. I won't be a sinful wife even at the last moment. I'm willing to die with honor, to live without humiliation. This niece doesn't know about Yang Buotao. Uncle, don't be ashamed of this niece. In front of my parents' graves, I hope that uncle can discern for me. This unfilial daughter bids farewell. Qiu Jianhan's hands were trembling as tears streamed down his cheeks. This was the daughter left behind by the brother who had died on the battlefield. The last words he left behind in his life were to defend himself. I didn't know. If I had known, there would have been a different outcome. I didn't let you down. I didn't let my parents down. I didn't let Yutong down. Lang Daoyin leaned over to take a look inside deeply, saying in a low voice, "It's the child left behind by San Lang." Qiu Jianhan's eyes were brimming with hot tears. "Pack up and report to His Majesty as soon as possible." On the same afternoon, the imperial edict was announced. Yang Buotao had colluded with the enemy and betrayed the country. His crime was unpardonable. He had conspired to murder the 9 supremes and caused their deaths, plunging the empire into a precarious situation. The fugitive Yang, if discovered, could be executed by anyone. Anyone who reported traitor Yang's whereabouts would be rewarded with 1,000 silver taels. Those who killed traitor Yang would be rewarded with 10,000 gold taels and be made a marquis of 10,000 households. That was the general meaning of the edict. The northern troop was reorganized from top to bottom. His Majesty had personally decreed that the eastern marshal, Tai Zhang, was to be transferred to the north along with his accompanying officers. The position of the eastern marshal would be temporarily taken over by the eastern troops' assistant marshal. This transfer was a last resort. The northern troops' morale was low now. They needed a strong marshal to reunite them before they could be put to use. Other than Tai Zhang, there was no other person in the entire empire of Yutong at this stage. On the same night, Tai Zhang brought a few janissaries and stepped into the northern troops' military camp. Yang Buotao's janissaries and subordinates had long been under control. Fortunately, these people were well behaved and did not resist, which saved them a lot of trouble. Once Tai Zhang arrived, he was the first to request to see these people. The northern military camp was currently shrouded in an indescribable atmosphere of deathly stillness. All Tai Zhang could see were the gazes of people who were on the brink of death. They were filled with despair and sorrow. All 500 of Yang Buotao's janissaries were there. All of them were filled with the will to die. The will to die did not belong to anyone else but themselves. "Everyone gather." Tai Zhang walked in with large strides and commanded loudly, his voice reverberating throughout the place. As soon as the order was given, the 500 men, though their expressions were weary and their spirits were even more dispirited, they still gathered together swiftly. From this, it could be seen that this group of people were the cream of the crop. As the janissaries of the marshal, how could they be qualified if they did not possess a certain level of capability, loyalty, and self-awareness to follow orders? Tai Zhang could not help but be even more certain of his earlier decision, but his face was still dark as he walked to a higher spot. His body was already taller than an ordinary person's, but he liked to stand on high ground. Now that he was looking down from above, he seemed even taller and stronger. He looked like an iron tower, standing there majestically. "Why are all of you lowering your heads?" Tai Zhang hollered. "Raise your heads." There was still silence below. Not many of them had lifted their heads. Tai Zhang scoffed and said, "Are you all rebelling? Didn't you hear the military order I gave just now? All of you, raise your heads with your chests up. Everyone look at me." Military law was absolute. Since Tai Zhang was the highest commanding officer here, his order was a military order. Everyone present had to execute it unconditionally, without any hesitation. With this command, all 500 of them raised their heads with their chests up, their gazes focused on Tai Zhang. Whether these 500 janissaries were willing or unwilling, all they could see at this moment was Tai Zhang's mighty image. "I don't want to say too much about pretty words and threats," Tai Zhang said. "Although Yang Buotao's crimes are unpardonable, this person still has a bottom line after all. He didn't bring anyone from the military with him at the last moment. No matter how heinous his crimes are, it's good that he didn't drag any of you into this during today's public trial. At least he still has a shred of conscience, as expected of a real man." Tai Zhang said, "All of you are his janissaries, this can't be changed. However, regarding Yang Buotao's betrayal of the 9 Supremes Lords, I believe that none of you are involved. He would never dare complete such a thing through your hands. If it were me, I would have done it myself. The implications of this matter are too great. No matter how much I trust all of you, there will always be concerns. Therefore, this must be Yang Buotao's doing alone. It has nothing to do with all of you. All of you don't have to look dead now. No one says what to do to all of you. After all, other than being Yang Buotao's janissaries, all of you are soldiers of the northern troop and Yutong's military men. This cannot be denied." Once Tai Zhang said this, everyone's eyes shone. "Now, I'll give all of you the chance to choose freely. The first choice is, Those who are willing to follow Yang Buotao and stay by his side through life and death. You can step out now and I won't hold you accountable. I'll respect your feelings and choices. However, your military status will be revoked and you'll become a free man from now on, free to live or die as you please. The second choice is that I, Tai Zhang, have come to lead the northern troop under the Emperor's order. I've only brought less than 30 men with me, so I lack janissaries of my own, janissaries who can accompany me on the battlefield to kill the enemy and entrust my back to them. If all of you are willing to become my janissaries, I'll gladly accept it. As for the third choice, it's to remove your original identity as janissaries, disband the organization and join the army. You can start from the bottom and slowly prove your loyalty to the Empire of Yutong on the battlefield. I choose the third choice. The janissary general raised his hand and said, "Join the army and start from the bottom." Tai Zheng's eyes shone as he focused his gaze on the general. He had said, "I" and not "we." This was tantamount to leaving room for his other brothers to choose. After all, if they chose to become Tai Zheng's janissaries, they could prove themselves as well. After the first person had voiced out his choice, more and more people stepped forward to choose the third option. Finally, 471 men stood out from the 500 men, all of them choosing the third option. However, there were still 29 men who stood where they were, their expressions blank and blank. Tai Zheng asked, "What's your choice?" A tall man with a face full of scars stood up and said, "I choose the first option." Tai Zheng's gaze froze. It was unknown if it was because the man with a face full of scars had spoken up first, but the other 28 men followed suit and said, "We choose the first option as well." Tai Zheng nodded slowly and said, "All right. Clerk, record these 29 men and process them according to the normal discharge procedures. Issue them a return ticket and revoke their military status. They will leave the army from now on. Pass my order as well. No one is allowed to trouble them with the excuse of being Yang Buotao's janissaries. Those who disobey will be severely punished." "Yes. Thank you, Marshal Tai." Chapter 254. The tall leader said, "It's not that we are unwilling to serve the country, it's just that." He sighed and said, "There's no need for the money to return home. We are eternally grateful for Marshal Tai's order today. We bid our farewells here." As his words trailed off, he led his brothers out of the camp. The 471 men who had chosen to start over from the bottom stood silently, sending off their brothers who had chosen to leave with their gazes. Just like Tai Zhang had said, there was no regret for those who stayed, no guilt for those who left. Everyone had their own ambitions and followed their own hearts. Tai Zheng's gaze was trained on the janissary general who puffed up his chest and said, "Don't blame us, Marshal Tai. As Marshal Yang's janissary, if we were to be taken in by Marshal Tai as your janissary, even if the brothers of the northern troop won't be dissatisfied with the marshal, we won't be able to rest easy. We're willing to kill the enemy and start over. To us, as long as we can fight on the battlefield again, it's enough." Tai Zheng sighed. He knew the meaning of the janissary general's words. Although he had stated clearly that these janissary soldiers had not participated in framing the Nine Supremes and should not be punished for it, Yutong soldiers and military brothers did not know the reason. If they saw the janissary soldiers who had followed the treacherous officials become the new favorite janissary of the northern troop succeeding marshal, how could they not feel resentful? Oh, how could those who had made a mistake continue to enjoy their original treatment? There was no such logic. "Very well. I respect your individual choices," Tai Zheng said. "Collect your names and military records later. Start all over again from the lowest rank. I'll only say this once more. From now on, we shall walk this journey together and not speak of the past. From now on, the northern troop's surname is Tai." Tai Zheng lifted his head and spoke in a faint but resolute tone. "Pass down my military order. The northern troop will set up a new training camp. The original training content will be doubled. The northern troop's training base will be expanded immediately. Within a month, I want to see 30,000 trained soldiers to join the war at the northern border. If the soldiers who are on duty do not meet the combat requirements, the training general will be beheaded. If there's any disturbance in the northern barracks within Yutong's borders, the commanding general will be beheaded immediately without any chance to defend himself. Tomorrow, assemble 10,000 soldiers and follow me to the northern frontier. This battle is directed at the Empire's northern border. I, Tai Zhang, shall flatten the northern border. I shall not return without victory. That afternoon, Tai Zhang patrolled the northern troops' camp for the first time, gathering the high-ranking generals for a lecture. On the same night, the eastern troop gathered a list of 1,000 people that Tai Zhang needed and had them report to the northern troop immediately. All of them were then dismissed and returned home to reunite with their families. The next morning, the sky had just brightened. Tai Zhang led an army of 10,000 men and officially departed, galloping towards the northern border. That very night, 17 of Yang Buotao's 29 personal guards committed suicide in front of the ruins of Yang Buotao's old house. The other 12 were nowhere to be found. If Yang Buotao had died because he was wronged or because he had no other choice, then the number of people who sacrificed their lives would probably increase by several times. However, it was true that Yang Buotao had betrayed the 9 Supremes and his crime of treason. In the end, only these 17 people died here, paying with their lives. Even so, these 17 corpses that still stood erect still caused a stir in the capital city. Qiu Jianhan personally ordered the burial and sighed. Such a good man, yet he ended up like this. It's a pity. Sigh. No matter what reason Yang Buotao had for killing the 9 Supremes, his conduct as a marshal of an army is indeed worthy of his reputation. That afternoon, Yun Yang chased after Yang Buotao all the way out of Tiantang City. Initially, Yun Yang had thought that Yang Buotao's betrayal of the 9 Supremes was exposed and his act of treason was obvious. He was no longer of any value to the Four Seasons Tower and was completely abandoned. Whether it was on the surface or the inside, to Yutong, to the Four Seasons Tower, to the 9 Supremes, or even to himself, there was no chance of survival left. However, the Four Seasons Tower's combat power had unexpectedly come to his rescue. Many experts of the 7th peak and above who had died in this battle could be said to have died because of Yang Buotao. This was completely illogical, especially not in line with the Four Seasons Tower's conduct. Unless Yang Buotao had something that Yun Yang and the Empire of Yutong did not know about. Whether this was his identity, background, or some kind of secret, it was unknown. However, since this was worthy of the Four Seasons Tower's attention, the place that Yang Buotao was going to next must be one of the Four Seasons Tower's bases. Such a base was what Yun Yang yearned for the most. How could he let it go? Yun Yang utilized the power of wind and cloud at the same time. It looked like the biting cold wind was urging the white cloud in the sky to travel at lightning speed. But the white cloud that Yun Yang had transformed into was actually moving on its own, traveling even faster with the wind. It was also because of this that Yun Yang realized the answer to a question that he had not figured out before. Yun Yang had always been confident about his own safety. Even if the Four Seasons Tower really had the ability to go to heaven, it was impossible for them to set up a spiritual ceiling formation like the one at Tianxian Cliff under Tiantang Square overnight. On the day of the public trial, as long as he did not go down to join the battle, he, who had the 5 abilities, could change his form at any time and would not be afraid of any ambush. What Yun Yang could not understand was why the Four Seasons Tower was so confident. They did not take any additional action and allowed the public trial to proceed smoothly. Was it just to let Supreme Wind appear? If that was the case, did it not mean that they had the confidence to kill Supreme Wind the moment he appeared? However, what would they use to complete the kill? Before going to Tiantang Square, Yun Yang had not figured out the answer. However, the moment he arrived at Tiantang Square, Yun Yang acutely felt a threat that came from the sky. The sense of threat was unprecedentedly strong, but only Ling Xiaozui's domineering aura the other day could be stronger. In other words, the source of this threat was a superb expert, a pinnacle expert who had surpassed the level of 10th perfection. However, Yun Yang was not the least bit afraid. His cultivation base had improved tremendously and was no longer comparable to the time when he faced He Han Qing. Furthermore, he was already prepared to turn into the wind and leave at any time. Once he willed it, no one would be able to catch him. However, when he tailed the expert who had saved Yang Buotao all the way out of the city, Yun Yang finally realized what he had been afraid of, or rather, the Four Seasons Tower's real killer move against Supreme Wind was. Behind him, there was a saber shadow that seemed to have turned into a green color, tailing the gust of wind that he had transformed into. If it was not for Emmy's support that increased the observation ability of his deific consciousness, he would not have realized that there was a saber hidden in the sky. He circulated the power of wind and cloud at the same time. One of the forces moved forward as the wind while his body blended into the white clouds in the sky, traveling with the wind. As for the saber light, It had been tailing behind the cold wind, neither too fast nor too slow, neither too close nor too far away. Yun-yang had changed the speed of the wind a few times, whether it was slow or fast, but the saber light had maintained its inseparable state, tailing him just like that. In any case, it had used some unknown method to lock on to the force of his wind transformation. Yun-yang's heart skipped a beat. Was this the Four Seasons Tower's ultimate killer move? If he was really Eighth Brother Supreme Wind, he would only have the ability of the wind manifestation. He did not know if the hidden saber light really had the power to annihilate the wind manifestation. As long as he followed it like this, when his mystical qi cultivation base was exhausted and he had no choice but to return to his human form from his wind manifestation, it would be the time he would be killed by the saber. Thinking of this, Yun-yang was struck with a flash of inspiration. He recalled what Mi Kongquan had said to him before he died when he had killed him. Right, be careful. There's a saber in the sky. Yun-yang had not understood what it meant before this. There was a saber in the sky? How could there be a saber in the sky? Now, however, he understood. There was indeed a saber in the sky. It was a saber that had no shape or form at all. Now, at this very moment, this saber was the Four Seasons Tower's ultimate weapon to kill him. Yun-yang believed that in the eyes of this saber, Yun-yang, who had transformed into the wind, had been completely locked onto. He was now a child in the palm of the saber, a fish on the anvil at his mercy. As long as he continued to wait, he could wait for the wind to return to its human form and confirm the identity of the target. He would then know if the target had any other henchmen. Only then would he carry out the finishing move, uprooting and annihilating them once and for all. Why doesn't he do it now? If he were to follow me for such a long distance, there might be changes. Even if my cultivation base is shallow and I don't notice it, it's impossible for me to not notice it all the time. On the contrary, if my manifestation is broken, I won't be able to escape his grasp and I'll definitely be captured. Why go through so much trouble? Yes, even if he could completely lock on to the wind manifestation, he wouldn't be able to break the wind manifestation directly. Yun-yang pondered and came to a conclusion. Then, is this saber in the sky a person? Or is it only a saber being controlled by a person? In front of them, the person who had rescued Yang Buotao from the public trial was still carrying Yang Buotao on his back and was still sprinting forward. His speed was exactly the same as before and had not slowed down at all. They were now 200 miles away from Tiantang City. However, the person was still sprinting forward. There was a tall mountain in front of them, and on top of it was a dense forest. The person was moving very quickly, running at full speed without holding back. Yun-yang even noticed that the person had spat out a mouthful of blood as he ran, but instead of slowing down, he was running even faster. This meant that the person was using some sort of self-mutilation to forcefully propel himself to maintain his high speed. It was almost as if he was risking his life. Was it because Yang Buotao was too important or? Yun-yang's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that the other side in front is their real trap against me? Was the action in Tiantang Square just a pretense? That's right, it's indeed easy to set up some strange formations in such a desolate place. Chapter 255. They had sacrificed Yang Buotao, the marshal of the northern troop, 30 experts from the Four Seasons Tower, and sent out a mysterious saber in the sky to set up a fatal trap at a faraway place. This trap was very ingenious and targeted. This person who had saved Yang Buotao's life was escaping. Based on the current situation, no one else could catch up to him. Even if someone did, they would be killed by that saber. Only Supreme Wind's wind attribute manifestation could possibly catch up to him. As long as Supreme Wind caught up, the plan would be considered half completed. As for Yang Buotao, he was burdened with the blood feud of murdering the 9 Supremes. How could Supreme Wind not chase after the target of Supreme Wind's reappearance? Even if he knew the risk, he would still give chase. Therefore, this targeted plan was indeed flawless and flawless. Furthermore, if Yun-yang was only Supreme Wind and only had the power of wind manifestation, he would not even be able to notice the saber that was locked onto him from behind. That would be the end. It was a pity that the culprit of the wind manifestation was not Supreme Wind but Supreme Cloud. The so-called flawless targeted trap had a huge loophole. Yun-yang quickly came to a conclusion that there must be a trap in front of him. It was very likely to be a trap like the one at Tianxian Cliff that could lock down and restrict the manifestation ability, the spiritual ceiling formation. This was also the opponent's main killing move against Supreme Wind. Even if there was an accident and the spiritual sealing formation could not kill him in the end, it would not matter. The saber that was following him would become a backup and continue to follow him. He could not maintain the wind manifestation forever. Once his mystical chi cultivation base was exhausted, he would have to return to his human form eventually. Once he did so, he would die as well. In addition, the opponent must be thinking of following the clues to get rid of the threat once and for all. Yun Yang's mind raced, planning how to deal with the current crisis. Now, he had changed from being a hunter to being hunted. The situation was precarious and he had to think of a way to deal with it. There was no doubt that Heaven's Saber's cultivation base was unfathomable. What was more frightening was that Yun Yang did not even know how high this person's level was. Yun Yang was not even sure if Supreme Lord Spring Frost, He Hanqing, had such a cultivation base when he was at his peak. Although He Hanqing had heavily injured Yun Yang, who was in his wind manifestation with a single palm strike, it had been an unexpected turn of events and Yun Yang had just broken through. It was inevitable that he had been high-spirited and careless. More importantly, Yun Yang had just broken through to the 5th peak then and his manifestation cultivation base was only at the 4th level at most. Now, not only had his cultivation base increased tremendously, his manifestation cultivation base had also improved tremendously. Moreover, he was fully focused and cautious at all times. In such a state, Yun Yang was confident that even if he were to face He Hanqing, it would not be a problem for him to escape unscathed even if he still could not defeat him in a direct confrontation. In spite of this, the saber in the sky had locked onto and tracked Yun Yang like a maggot in a tarsal bone. It was not far from him, neither too fast nor too slow. Yun Yang was already shocked and terrified by it. Yun Yang even suspected that he would need to be at the level of Ling Xiaozue, Jun Moyan, and Dugu Cho to have such an ability. Even if there was still a gap, it would not be very far. With his current cultivation base, whether he could escape the pursuit of the saber in the sky or not, as long as his true identity was exposed, not only Yun Yang himself, but the entire residence of Yun would be annihilated. Yun Yang believed that even if the residence of Yun combined all of its combat power, it would still not be a match for the saber. This was the Four Seasons Tower's true ability. However, how was he going to deal with this person? To Yun Yang, it was not difficult to simply escape. He was not Supreme Wind after all. He only had the wind manifestation power, especially now that he still had the advantage. Now that he had the initiative and discovered the other party, it was not difficult for him to break away from the other party's pursuit. However, if he did so, Yang Buotao would definitely be able to escape. This was something that Yun Yang could not accept and was unwilling to do. Today, he had reappeared as one of the 9 Supremes with the ultimate goal of targeting Yang Buotao. If he were to escape, not only would it be a waste of effort, it would be a huge loss. How would he be able to face his brother's coffins? Yun Yang steeled his heart. He could not watch Yang Buotao being rescued, no matter what. This person had to die. The enemy who killed his brothers had already been caught by him, so he had to die. If he were to let the tiger return to the mountain today, he did not know when he would be able to see it again. Yun Yang carefully separated a strand of his attention to continue controlling the howling wind. He was still drifting with the white clouds, but he was deliberately and covertly gathering the clouds from all directions, slowly gathering them together, causing the sky to gradually darken. It looked like it was about to rain. Lightning began to flicker slowly in the clouds. Yun Yang was multitasking, using his various skills to weave a beautiful, hidden setup. However, the gale did not show any signs of slowing down, continuing to chase after the black silhouette in front until it rushed into the forest on the other end. When the gale entered the forest, there was a faint mystical saber light in the sky. However, the saber light disappeared in a flash, as if it had never existed. It was as if it had returned to waiting. Half of his mission had been completed. He only needed to wait for the follow-up results. Supreme Wind had already chased after the person into the forest. What followed next was the matter on the other side. Even if the formation on the other side could not kill Supreme Wind would still turn into the wind and escape in the end. As long as he turned into the wind and escaped, Yun Yang would be able to track him immediately since he had already locked onto his aura, all the way to his lair. Perhaps he could wait until the moment when his mystical chi was exhausted. Whether it was to eliminate the root of the problem or to kill Supreme Wind alone, Supreme Wind was dead for sure. Although he had promised Ice to bring Yang Buotao back alive, if Yang Buotao were to be killed before he could do anything, he could only blame it on his bad luck. The priority of this mission was to kill the 9 Supremes. The forest was filled with plants, so the visibility was much lower than on flat ground. What was more, the sudden shroud of dark clouds made the surroundings so dark that one could not even see their own fingers. In spite of this, the black silhouette still carried Yang Buotao and moved forward quickly without any delay. It was obvious that he was very familiar with the terrain of the forest. The howling of the wind suddenly increased in volume. Yang Buotao, who was lying on the back of the black silhouette, was still unconscious. There was a transparent hole on his thigh, where an arrow from the deicide bow had pierced through his thigh, taking away a section of his femur bone. If there was no special bone-forging technique, Yang Buotao would inevitably be crippled for life. There was another mystical steel arrow stuck on his waist, only half of the shaft exposed. Yang Buotao was wearing a soft armor made of an unusual material, but the mystical steel arrow had been shot by Tai Zhang with all his might. It had actually pierced through the soft armor and pierced into Yang Buotao's body. Looking at the depth, it had already entered the abdominal cavity. The gale was like a knife, causing the entire forest to emit a strange sound that resembled the wailing of ghosts and the howling of deities. Countless tree branches snapped, hitting the black silhouette and Yang Buotao like a thunderstorm. Blades of wind appeared out of nowhere and danced behind the two of them, showing off their sharpness. Amidst the darkness and chaos, the black figure was unable to dodge at all. He could only let out a wild roar and spit out a mouthful of blood. Green light blossomed from his body, and he used his pure profound qi cultivation to envelop both of their bodies. He mustered up his courage and continued to advance forward. However, his speed was inevitably slowed down. The black silhouette knew that the destination of the trap was at the top of the mountain. However, with his speed and Supreme Wind's constant attacks, it would be difficult for him to make it to the top of the mountain. OL 4th Qiao. The black silhouette increased the circulation of mystical qi, maintaining his defensive state. As he sprinted upwards with all his might, he suddenly shouted, "Come down and pick me up." On the top of the mountain, someone answered. Then, the rapid sound of the wind could be heard. The change was within the black silhouette's expectations. After Supreme Wind had sensed his call for help, he had pushed the wind attribute attack to its maximum limit. It was obvious that he wanted to kill both himself and Yang Buotao before the black silhouette's reinforcements arrived. It seemed that Supreme Wind really hated Yang Buotao to the core and would not rest until he was dead. Even though he understood this, the black silhouette was powerless. If he was at his peak, he would be able to fight Supreme Wind's Windblade encirclement. Even if he could not, it would not be a problem for him to hold on until the reinforcements arrived or to the top of the mountain. However, he had fought his way out of Tiantang's city. He had even borrowed the advantage of being in the outermost layer, sprinting all the way down from the city wall. Up till now, he had forcefully activated the Life Force Arcane Art twice. He was already at the end of his tether. If he was not at the end of his tether, why would he have to call for help? He might not be able to defend himself against a 5th peak cultivator's attack now. The wind blades flew wildly. Finally, with a pop, the mystical Qi's air shield broke while the expert spat out a mouthful of blood. He staggered, carrying Yang Buotao on his back as he crashed into a big tree. The mouthful of blood was not the price of forcefully activating the arcane art. He was seriously injured. The black silhouette was finally exhausted, unable to hold on any longer. However, the sound of the wind was still shrill as the wind blades continued to fall. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. With a flash of cold light, blood splattered. The black silhouette expert who had been carrying Yang Buotao on his back had actually cried out before his head was separated from his body, heading to the underworld. At the same time that the black silhouette expert had perished, a gush of warmth flowed into Yun Yang's senses. It was the qi of injustice. Yun Yang snorted softly as he materialized again. Above him, another black silhouette shot over like an arrow. Supreme Wind. You live up to your reputation indeed. Take this. Chapter 256. Not only did Yang Buotao not accept the attack, he had also carried Yang Buotao up into the air. The silhouette hollered and changed his direction at the last moment, leaping up from halfway up the mountain. His body was like a javelin as he leaped hundreds of feet into the air, grabbing onto Yang Buotao's legs by a hair's breadth. Come down. Yang Buotao had just gotten rid of the enemy and had yet to catch his breath. Moreover, he had just gotten up and the wind was still rising. With a soft sound, Yang Buotao was pulled down by the person. However, the wind howled once more, chasing after him with a howl. Yang Buotao was caught in the middle of the two tugs. Due to the fact that he was unconscious, his mystical qi could only circulate passively. How could he withstand such a pull? He spat out a mouthful of blood while Yang Buotao slowly regained consciousness, only to see a green silhouette pouncing towards him from midair. His body was being carried by someone as he ran for his life. "Put me down!" Yang Buotao coughed, calling out with an unknown source of strength. "It's Lord Supreme Wind up there. Yang Buotao has something to say." The person carrying him was startled by this sudden reaction. He did not expect that he would suddenly be ambushed, and that the person who ambushed him was Yang Buotao himself. The moment Yang Buotao regained consciousness, he suddenly gathered all the strength in his body, and with a desperate stance, he struck the person's back with his palm. Although Yang Buotao was seriously injured, as the commander of an army, his profound qi cultivation was naturally not mediocre. Moreover, under such a situation where there was no distance between them and they were completely defenseless, Yang Buotao had suddenly struck a vital point on his back. Even if the black-clothed man's cultivation was far above Yang Buotao's, he still violently spat out a mouthful of blood. His body staggered, and Yang Buotao, who was behind him, was separated from his back. He tumbled down and crashed into a large tree trunk, spitting out a mouthful of blood. You bastard!" The black-clothed man felt as if all the bones in his back had been shattered by Yang Buotao's palm, and his eyes widened in anger. Yun Yang was surprised to see the sudden turn of events, but he quickly adapted to the situation and focused his attack on the black silhouette. The black silhouette, who had been passively attacked by Yang Buotao's palm, lost his footing and was flustered. How could he deal with Yang Buotao's ferocious attack? He was struck once again, his entire body slamming against the tree trunk, almost fainting from the pain. He knew that he had suffered a serious internal injury. Seeing the green ball of wind slowly descending, his intention to pursue was obvious. He cursed hatefully, "Good words can't persuade a damned ghost. Even if you pull yourself out of the gates of hell, you'll still crash back into it." With that said, he turned around and left. He couldn't stay any longer. If he stayed any longer, he would probably die here as well. Yang Buotao's mind was in a trance as he watched a cyan gas swirl down from the sky and land in front of him. It was a cyan silhouette, ethereal and indistinct. He could not help but ask, "May I ask if Supreme Wind is here in person?" Yun Yang replied faintly, "Yang Buotao, what do you have to say to me?" Yang Buotao's earlier attack had injured the black silhouette, but he had also suffered from the reverse impact of the mystical qi. With his frail body that had been repeatedly injured, he was in a precarious situation. With just a slight struggle, the mystical steel arrow at his waist had almost split his upper and lower body into two. It was obvious that he would not survive. Spitting out mouthfuls of blood, he no longer had the air of a marshal of the northern troop. He stared at Yun Yang and said, "Lord Supreme Wind is my wife." Yun Yang pondered and said, "You should know your wife's personality. Think about it yourself. How likely is it that she's still alive now?" Yang Buotao's gaze dimmed as he said, "I've let her down." Yun Yang said coldly, "Yang Buotao, you haven't let her down, nor have you let me down. But as a citizen of Yutong, don't you feel that you've let down this country? Let down the brothers who shouldn't have died but have died because of what you've done?" Yang Buotao's gaze dimmed as he said, "Now that things have come to this, there's no point in talking more." Yun Yang's murderous intent had long been uncontrollable. If Yang Buotao had not risked his life to attack the black silhouette, Yun Yang would not have given him a chance to speak. He said in a low voice, "You said you had something to tell me just now. Was it only to ask about your wife's whereabouts?" Yang Buotao chuckled with difficulty, blood trickling from the corners of his mouth as he said bitterly, "When I was young, my parents were kind and loving. My days were happy and peaceful. However, when I was 12, my mother passed away in an accident. My father was traumatized and disappeared. It was also that year that I entered the military. After so many years of war, I became the marshal of the northern troop. I, Yang Buotao, could be considered to have achieved success and recognition. I don't think I've disgraced my ancestors." It was until the year before last when my father found me. He looked haggard, like he didn't have long to live. Yang Buotao chuckled miserably and said, "At the time, I reunited with my family after a long separation. Other than being overjoyed, I also lamented that I wanted to raise my son but my parents weren't around. I waited by my father's bedside for months and even missed a great battle. However, there was only one wish in my heart then. As long as my father could recover, I, Yang Buotao, would willingly die for it, even if I, Yang Buotao, had to die a horrible death. It was a pity that no one could make my father's health better, even if I, Yang Buotao, had to die a horrible death. Just as I was feeling helpless and heartbroken, my father told me that his injuries were incurable, but there was still a way for him to continue living. It was just that this method was extremely difficult." Yun Yang listened carefully. Yang Buotao's voice was weak. Every word he uttered was choppy. However, Yun Yang knew that what Yang Buotao was saying now was not a lie. From the mouths of the many doctors I'd invited, I'd already known that my father's illness was incurable and that there would be no turning point. Yet, hearing my father say that there was a way, it was heavenly. Back then, I only knew that I had to save my father's life. Even if I had to go through a mountain of blades and a sea of fire, I wouldn't hesitate. What difficulty was there to be afraid of? Therefore, my father told me that his physical condition was one that defied nature, an injury inflicted by heaven's wrath. This injury was incurable and incurable. No spiritual medicine, arcane art or cultivation method could do anything about it. Only the most fundamental power in this world could heal it. In addition, a single source of power was also useless. The 9 forces of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, thunder, blood, wind, and cloud had to be gathered together to help him change the 5 elements, cleanse his blood, temper his bones with wind and thunder, and solidify his form with the help of the clouds. Only then could he be reborn and fully healed. However, in order to complete this task, I would need the 9 Supremes to gather. This has stumped me. This stumped me, because this matter had far exceeded the scope of my authority. It's not just a question of whether I can do it. Not to mention that I can't find the 9 Supremes. Even if we could meet 1 or 2 of them, there wouldn't be much of a chance for us to talk. Let's just say that the 9 Supremes Lords have been assisting Yutong's battlefield all year round. How can we trouble the 9 Supremes Lords for one family? Not to mention the fact that His Majesty has already ordered everyone to gather information about the 9 Supremes. I've worried about this day and night. I've ventured to the residence of 9 Supremes many times, but I've never had the chance to meet him. Then, Father told me that he could ask for help from the 9 Supremes himself because he had a treasure that could move the 9 Supremes to help him. The 9-beam rainbow herb. As long as he can see the 9 Supremes, he'll exchange the 9-beam rainbow herb for a chance to live. If the 9 Supremes still don't agree, then he'll use my name to beg. Yun Yang sighed. You believe that? 9 Sky Rainbow Herb. It was the legendary divine item of heaven and earth, a creation item of absolute class. The 9 Firmament Rainbow Herb was an extremely miraculous item. According to legend, when the sky was filled with endless purple clouds, 9 rainbows would appear. The moment these 9 rainbows appeared, lightning would descend from the sky. If this lightning struck someone, then the 9 rainbows in the sky would enter the dantian of this person. If this person was a Shen cultivator, then the 9 rainbows would transform into the 9 Firmament Rainbow Herb in his dantian. The 9-beam rainbow herb had 9 colors and 9 leaves. Each leaf had the purest luster. If someone ate all 9 leaves of the 9-beam rainbow herb, not only would he be immortal and invincible, he would also have the cultivation base of a god that could shatter the heavens with one hand and shatter the earth with a stomp of his feet. It would not be an exaggeration to call him an eternal immortal. If it was shared among 9 people, these 9 people would become long-lasting brothers, establishing the foundation of immortalhood. As long as everyone worked together, they could become eternal immortals in time. However, the above was only a legend. Without actual proof, no one would take it seriously. First of all, the conditions for the emergence of the 9-beam rainbow herb were too harsh. Not to mention how many years it took for the purple clouds to appear. The fact that 9 rainbows had to appear at the same time when the purple clouds filled the sky was something that might not even happen once in a billion years. What was even more ridiculous was that there had to be thunder and lightning at this time. When the purple clouds filled the sky and rainbows followed, it would most likely be a sunny day. How could there be thunder and lightning at that time? Therefore, The timing was very unlikely. Not to mention that the lightning had to fall and strike a person, and this person had to be a mystical cultivator. This was even more ridiculous. How could there be so many coincidences in the world? Furthermore, even if all of the above were true, the 9 firmament rainbow herb had to be nurtured and grown in that lucky person's dantian. Since the rainbow herb had such miraculous effects, the amount of nutrients it needed during its growth must be astonishing. What kind of mystic cultivator could afford it? Furthermore, even if a mystic cultivator could afford it, it should be someone with considerable attainments in Xueqi. Who would be willing to sacrifice themselves for a blade of grass and another person? Chapter 257. Yang Buotao's expression was mournful as he chuckled bitterly. If it were someone else, I wouldn't believe it, but it was my father. My biological father. My father had also asked me to check his dantian. I've checked and there's really a plant with 9 leaves in his dantian. Once I checked, I felt that my cultivation base has improved. It's not a lie. If it's not a peerless treasure, how could it be so miraculous? My father said that there are 2 of you now. The first one is to let me eat this herb so that I can live forever. However, the rainbow herb is something that the heavens are jealous of. It must be plucked before the host dies, and before it is plucked, the host cannot commit suicide. In other words, I need to kill my own father in order to obtain the rainbow herb of the 9 firmament. As for the second option, it's to exchange the 9-beam rainbow herb for the 9 supremes' help. The reason my father is suffering from such an injury is because he's nurtured this herb. This herb is envied by the heavens, and only by gathering the 9 energies can he escape this disaster and let my father live. My father finished and said that I'll choose between the 2 options. No matter what I choose, my father won't have any complaints. The more Yang Buotao spoke, the more excited he became and the smoother his speech became. A tinge of redness appeared on her originally pale face. Yun Yang sighed, knowing that Yang Buotao was already in a state of terminal lucidity. He could die at any time, his soul going to the netherworld. I'm ashamed to say this. I hesitated then, fantasizing about becoming an eternal immortal. Yang Buotao chuckled bitterly, but I decided immediately that I had to save my father no matter what. I had to help my father survive. By then, the 9 Supremes Lords who had obtained the 9-beam rainbow herb would have a great increase in their abilities and become a true legend of Yutong, forever dominating Yutong. Yun Yang was completely dumbfounded as he spoke. He really did not expect that there would be such a reversal from the beginning of the matter. Was this a reversal of fate? Was this the original intention of the person who schemed against the 9 brothers? I told my father about my decision and he said that before I could seek help from the 9 Supremes, I still needed to find a miraculous herb called the Heartbreak Herb. As long as the 9 Supremes' location was confirmed, my father would be able to suppress his injuries temporarily after consuming the Heartbreak Elixir and negotiate with the 9 Supremes. Once the deal is done, when the venom of the heartbroken sorrow acts up, cut open his dantian and take out the 9-beam rainbow herb for the 9 Supremes to consume. Then, we'll transfer the spiritual energy to reconstruct my father's flesh and blood and condense the 5 elements into his body. Only then can the curse of death be completely lifted. It will be a happy ending for all. Other than that, my father wanted me to make a vow that if the 9 Supremes were unwilling to help, or if the 9 Supremes could not be gathered in the end, he would only have a fleeting opportunity to consume the heartbreaking sorrow. If he missed it, he would not be able to live anymore. However, he wanted me to not hold a grudge against the 9 Supremes. After all, we are all citizens of Yutong. The 9 Supremes are too important. I must not hold a grudge against the 9 Supremes for a family matter. Yang Buotao's expression was one of shock. At that time, I completely believed what my father said. I've even been worried that my father would die if the 9 Supremes did not agree to it. From then on, I became an orphan again. The sorrow of wanting to raise a child, but his parents are gone, will come again. It was also from that day onwards that I started collecting all the information about the 9 Supremes, any information, everything. For this, I've even bribed many people. I've always wanted to talk to the 9 Supremes, but I never had the chance. Finally, one day when I came out of the palace, I heard that His Majesty wanted to meet the 9 Supreme Earth. I've been waiting in the palace with great effort and finally spoke to Supreme Earth. Lord Supreme Earth, I have something I need your help with. I wonder if it's convenient? At that time, Supreme Earth said in surprise, What matter does Marshal Yang need from me? I'll come to your residence to look for you later. I went home happily, waiting for Supreme Earth to come and complete the important matter in my heart. However, Supreme Earth did not come that night. What I waited for was His Majesty's edict the next day, reprimanding me and depriving me of half a year's worth of salary to atone for my crime. I finally knew that the path of simply waiting for an opportunity was destined to be a dead end. Who knew that a few days later, someone in the palace would suddenly tell me that the 9 Supremes were going to do something important. At that time, I only knew that the opportunity had come and that it would never come again if I missed it. Yun Yang's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He asked, "Who told you this?" The Minister of Imperial Household, Jiang Zhong. Yang Buotao gritted his teeth hatefully. How could I miss this last chance? So I went around asking where the 9 Supremes lords were going. It was also at that time that another person came to me and told me that the 9 Supremes needed to bring 800 warriors to complete this mission. This person was Fu Baogua. I was chatting with him in the Board of Military then and accidentally brought it up. He didn't say anything else after that. I was overjoyed then, thinking that heaven always blesses the kind, taking pity on me for saving my father's life and receiving this information. Yun Yang truly did not know what he was feeling at this moment. Ring after ring, wrapped around Yang Buotao's body, it was truly extremely exquisite and tight. Yang Buotao had been asking for all the information about the 9 Supremes. These people who were on good terms with him would also help him in his search. Whether it was intentional or not, even if they leaked the information to Yang Buotao, there was no way to prove that this person was the Four Seasons Tower's spy. In spite of this, such a plan was shocking to hear. My only thought at that time was to find the 9 Supremes. The movement of 800 people was far from what the 9 Supremes could do alone. There were finally traces. After all, I was a marshal, it was easy for me to know about these movements. After many observations, I finally confirmed that a small troop had left Tiantang City and headed east. That small troop must be where the 9 Supremes were. I knew that this was the only chance to ascertain the whereabouts of the 9 Supremes, so I went back and told my father about it. My father consumed the heartbreak pill and the life-replenishing pill at once to recover his 10th perfection cultivation base, and went after the 9 Supremes through the night. Since then, I've been waiting for my father's news. I hope that when my father recovers and returns, when the 9 Supremes' names shake the world and become invincible experts, they will become the immortal legend of Yutong. Yutong will no longer have to fight and Tianxian will be conquered. Sometimes, I wonder how my father's cultivation base could be so high. Yet, I convinced myself that my father must have had a fortuitous encounter. If he didn't have such a cultivation base, how could he have nurtured the 9-beam rainbow herb? There are so many experts out there. As a son, I should be honored to have such a father. How could I doubt my own father? What an unfilial descendant. I've been waiting, but in the end, what I waited for was a nightmare that felt like the sky had fallen. The 9 Supremes were ambushed in Tianxian Cliff. None of them survived. This news was like a bolt from the blue. It broke me down on the spot. I was eating then and accidentally smashed the entire table into smithereens. It was as if I had lost my soul. Never would I have dreamed that it would be such an outcome. But that was my biological father. Not to mention that his face, aura, and love for me remained the same. He knew everything about me since I was young, including how mischievous I was when I was young, what birthmark I had on my body, my real father. How could I doubt my own father? Everything he did, all his thoughts and actions were reasonable, within reason, even righteous. Why should I doubt him? If the nightmare hadn't come, I wouldn't have believed it at all. But the truth was right before my eyes. How could I not know that there's something wrong with my father? And it's because of the information I provided. I, Yang Buotao, have become the empire of Yutong's unforgivable sinner. Yang Buotao's eyes were filled with bewilderment as he repeated, "Sinner." He was a sinner for all eternity. Yun Yang sighed inwardly. He did not know what to say. Yang Buotao's breath gradually weakened as he spoke. His face grew paler and paler. He struggled with all his might and pleaded softly, "Lord Supreme Wind, give me a breath, let me finish." Yun Yang sighed and pressed his hand against the center of his back, sending a wisp of refined mystical qi over. "I wanted to bring this matter to my grave. I didn't even tell my wife. This is the shame of my life. It's better to say that I'm a completely bad person. But when I saw Lord Supreme Wind that day, Lord Supreme Wind had clearly pointed his target at me. I had the urge to let it all out. It was only just now that I finally decided to tell everyone about this matter. I don't want my wife to still ignore me when she's in the underworld. I don't want my wife to still think that her husband is a hypocrite, a treacherous, unpardonable person even when she's in the underworld. She has entrusted her life to the wrong person. Yang Buotao's gaze was unfocused as he held his breath forcefully and mumbled to himself. She won't. Yun Yang sighed. Yun Yang really did not know what to say at this point. So many of his brothers had died because of his intelligence, yet he had to comfort him instead? But who could be blamed for this? More than 10 days later, my father came back. He said he wanted to bring me far away. He would even give me a brighter future. Yang Buotao said weakly. I asked him frantically, why? Why did he do this? Why? Extreme insanity flashed in Yang Buotao's eyes. Actually, I had already vaguely guessed then that my father was from the Four Seasons Tower, and he was one of the Four Seasons Tower's higher-ups. If it wasn't so, I would have been silenced. But I still wanted to ask to get to the bottom of this, to get to the bottom of it. I couldn't accept it. I had fought for Yutong my entire life, but in the end, I became a sinner. My father told me directly that the existence of the 9 Supremes was a huge threat and that they had to be eliminated. It would be the continent's fortune if all of them died. This wasn't a family matter, it was something that should be done, something that should be done. But I didn't understand. I really didn't. Then I asked him, was the 9-beam rainbow herb real? He said it was fake. Everything was a lie to ascertain the whereabouts of the 9 Supremes. Yang Buotao was the most important part of this lie. Heh. And the one who triggered this most important part of me was my biological father. Heh. Yang Buotao's voice was bleak. Although he was laughing, his laughter was self-deprecating, his gaze empty and dead. If I were to die in the battlefield, die of illness, die of poison, I, Yang Buotao, could smile and be fearless. But to die like this, because of such a reason, to bear the eternal infamy, a humiliation that could never be washed away, I, Yang Buotao, would not die in peace. Chapter 258. No matter who it was, they would not feel good if they were deceived and used by their biological father like this. What was more, someone like Yang Buotao had everything destroyed. However, the one who had destroyed everything was his biological father. How could he explain it? He wanted me to bring him away, but I refused. He left a few days later. When he left, I didn't send him off. I don't know how to treat him anymore. Yang Buotao said, but I still want to live here. I want to atone for my sins, I want to continue contributing to Yutong, to make up for my mistakes, until the day I die in the battlefield. I was really naive then. Perhaps I could die in the battlefield during one of the great wars, ending all my troubles once and for all. I could be lucky enough to stay in this world. No matter what, I still have to keep this secret. Since no one knows about it, I can only carry it on myself because I have so many brothers of the Northern Troop behind me. I can't let them be shamed because of me, unable to lift their heads because of me. I can only hide it as much as I can and do things carefully, Yang Buotao said, but I didn't have to wait until the day I die on the battlefield. To me, innocence is a luxury that I can't afford. What man does is watched by the heavens. The cycle of reincarnation has never spared anyone. Yang Buotao looked at Yun Yang and said softly, Lord Supreme Wind, to be able to die in your hands today, I, Yang Buotao, have no regrets. I'm even happy to die. I'm grateful. Even though I can't rest in peace. Yang Buotao said weakly, there's only one thing I have to remind Supreme Wind. After the incident, I've thought about it and connected the dots. I realized that a lot of people knew that I was inquiring about the 9 Supremes. Many of them even provided me with information about the 9 Supremes intentionally or unintentionally. However, none of them stood up to question me after the incident. Isn't this extremely strange? Yun Yang's gaze flickered as he asked, who else has provided you with information? Yang Buotao said, many people. Besides the Minister of Imperial Household Jiang Zhong and Fu Baogua, there's also the Minister of Imperial Household Mi Kongquan. Right, the fourth prince has also spoken to me about it. Yun Yang's gaze froze.
The fourth prince? Are you sure?
Yang Buetao's eyes were clear.
Do you think I would lie to you at a time like this?
Yun Yang sucked in a deep breath and said, "One last question. Who exactly is your father to the Four Seasons Tower? I'm sure you know the answer.
You want me to avenge you, right?"
Yang Buetao smiled sadly. "I do know the answer, but Lord Supreme Wind,
I'm really sorry.
I can't tell you the answer." Yun Yang was stunned. "No matter how wrong he was, no matter what, he is still my biological father," Yang Buetao stuttered. "I know that if he hadn't appeared, I, Yang Buetao, might have the chance to become a legend of Yutong, to be recorded in the history books, to be a famous general for all eternity. But now, I'll only be left with an eternal infamy. But that's my father after all. This is something that can never be erased. I've always kept it a secret because of this. Although my father harmed me, but I don't want to betray him." Yun Yang closed his eyes and said softly, "Go then. Yang Buetao. After you die, I'll think of a way for you and your wife to reunite in the underworld." Yang Buetao's eyes were gleaming with delight as he said, Thank you. I'll explain to my wife in the underworld." As the last word left his mouth, a thick gush of blood suddenly rose in his throat, blocking his throat. His eyes stared into the void, his gaze flickering. Suddenly, he swallowed the mouthful of blood with a forceful effort. His throat was clear again as he looked at Yun Yang and said sincerely, "I'm sorry." Yun Yang heaved a long sigh, closing his eyes and turning his face away. He could hear Yang Buetao's throat gurgling beside him as he suddenly said contentedly, "So you're still waiting for me? It's so good to have you by my side." With a jerk of his body, he stopped breathing. This renowned marshal of Yutong, a general who carried an indelible infamy in this world, had finally passed away. Yun Yang propped himself up, feeling like his heart was about to explode. The Four Seasons Tower. It was still the Four Seasons Tower. These maniacal scum. When could they be executed with every slash? Looking at Yang Buetao's cold corpse, Yun Yang could only feel a wave of sorrow. A renowned marshal of his generation, with a lifetime of clean reputation, had come to this day step by step because of someone's scheme. There was no other explanation for all of this other than fate playing a trick on him. Even if he was a saint, how could he suspect his own kin? Moreover, he had seen the 9-beam rainbow herb with his own eyes. How could he not believe it? As a son, did he have to cut open his father's stomach to prove that it was a lie? He had provided information about the 9 Supremes' whereabouts and had indeed caused the 9 Supremes' demise. But Yun Yang let out a deep breath and enunciated each and every word clearly and painfully. "Fourth Tower." Then, he suddenly snapped out of it, feeling puzzled. He had been talking to Yang Buetao here for so long. Why had the Four Seasons Tower's men not appeared yet? Was their goal to eradicate the 9 Supremes once and for all? Logically speaking, they should have appeared a long time ago. Yun Yang's body was still in the state of metamorphosis. Ultimately, it was just a ball of condensed green wind swirling around him. A soft sigh came from behind him, like the wind blowing through the treetops. He turned around like a whirlwind. Indeed, there was a masked man dressed in black standing hundreds of feet behind him. The person had blended into the darkness of the surrounding trees without a sound. If he had not turned around, he would not have realized that there was actually someone beside him. In fact, he had been standing there. Looking at his posture, it seemed that he had been standing there for a long time. From his dignified demeanor, it was not difficult to tell that this person was a top-notch expert. Seeing Yun Yang turn around, the man chuckled softly. "The renowned Supreme Wind indeed lives up to your reputation. This old man has been standing here for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea." Yun Yang said faintly, "Perhaps you'll have to continue standing there. I don't think that you can hurt me with any movement." The man in black smiled faintly and said, "If I had made a move, at least Lord Supreme Wind wouldn't be able to listen to Yang Buetao so smoothly." Yun Yang snorted. This was the truth, it was hard to refute. "I've waited patiently, waiting for you to listen to everything Yang Buetao has to say before I speak. I think this is the greatest respect I can give to Lord Supreme Wind. I know that Lord Supreme Wind still has a lot of doubts. This is also the main reason why I'm standing here waiting for you." The masked man in black's voice was clear as he said, "This lord is waiting up there.
Perhaps Lord Supreme Wind can go and have a talk. All of Lord Supreme Wind's doubts will be completely resolved today.
Resolve all of my doubts? Yun Yang smiled mockingly and said, "Is that Mr. Nyen of yours up there?"
Yun Yang's words were not to confuse the enemy or to be arrogant. Speaking of his doubts, there were too many secrets. Looking at the world today, other than the Four Seasons Tower's leader, Mr. Nyen, no one else was qualified to say such a thing.
Whether it was all the information of the Four Seasons Tower's personnel, the spies hidden in the various countries of Tianxian continent, the spies in various sects and clans, or the experts, hermits, merchants, and commoners, these secrets could only be known by Mr. Nyen himself. Other than that, there was also the root of the problem that Yun Yang had always wanted to understand.
Why did the Four Seasons Tower and Mr. Nyen put in so much effort to go against the Nine Supremes? The Nine Supremes' original intention of entering the world was to help the Empire of Yutong, to protect and defend the country. Even if the legend was true, that the Nine Supremes would achieve greatness and lead the Empire of Yutong to conquer Tianxian and unify the continent, it would be difficult to shake the Four Seasons Tower's foundation. Although the Four Seasons Tower was deeply involved in various countries, it would be more advantageous for the Empire of Yutong to unify the continent or to control it from behind the scenes. There was no benefit to be gained from spending so much effort to deal with the Nine Supremes. This was also something that Yun Yang could not figure out. Although his 9 brothers possessed mystical powers, their actual cultivation base was still mediocre. At most, they could be used on the battlefield, but they were powerless against pinnacle experts. The most direct proof was that Hanqing had almost killed him with a single palm strike, despite his improved cultivation base. Was Mr. Nyen's painstaking plan really meaningful? Perhaps. There was a continuation to the so-called Nine Supremes legend that he did not understand? Yun Yang did not want his brothers to die without knowing the reason, so he had to get to the bottom of this. The masked man in black laughed. Such a trivial matter doesn't require our leader to do it personally. So, this is only a trivial matter to you. That's great. Yun Yang said faintly, "Please wait for a moment. A man's words must be kept. A man cannot stand without his words.
I've promised Yang Buotao that I'll reunite him and his wife, to meet them again in the netherworld." Before his words echoed in the air, Yun Yang waved his hand and spat out a wave of flame, enveloping Yang Buotao's corpse and burning it with a loud bang.
Then, the wind howled, swirling amidst the fire.
The fire burned even more intensely. An indescribable smell gradually filled the forest.
In less than the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Yang Buotao's muscular body had turned into ashes.
Yun Yang heaved a deep sigh and murmured, "Yang Buotao, the karma has been settled. We brothers don't hate you anymore.
May you rest in peace. If there's a next life, I hope to be friends with you."
With a flick of his hand, a robe was spread on the ground.
He carefully held Yang Buotao's ashes in it, wrapping it into a bundle and tying it on his back. Looking at the scorched ground, Yun Yang could not help sighing in his heart. A famed general of a generation, a hero of a lifetime. In the end, he had ended his life in such a manner. Before this, how could Yun Yang have thought that it would be such a reason?
Yang Buotao's father?
Yun Yang frowned. Yang Buotao's father used his son to do such a thing and destroyed his son's life. What a waste of a father. However, it's not unusual for Yang Buotao's father to be involved in such a matter. What's odd is that the Four Seasons Tower didn't silence him after the deed was done. This is a point worth discussing. Yang Buotao had obviously been exposed, but he still had so many experts from the Four Seasons Tower following him. When he was about to die, the Four Seasons Tower's experts risked their lives to save him. Obviously, Yang Buotao's father's position in the Four Seasons Tower is very high. But the Four Seasons Tower's highest position is Mr. Nyen. It's obviously not Yang Buotao's father. Chapter 259. In the past, there had always been the saying of cheating one's father. But Yang Buotao's opportunity was actually cheating one's father's. Should it be said that it was an eye-opener, or was it a poison that he had been poisoned?
"Don't worry, I will do what I say,"
Yun Yang said quietly.
Then, the green silhouette of the wind spun and faced the man in black who had been waiting quietly by the side.
"Lead the way. Let this reputed one see what tricks the Four Seasons Tower has up its sleeves."
The man in black laughed and said, "Lord Supreme Wind is indeed courageous.
Please follow me." He sprung up the mountain like a whirlwind. Yunyang snorted coldly. His green silhouette spun like a gust of wind and soared into the sky. With a swoosh, he soared high into the sky. The wind howled, but the direction of the rising wind suddenly changed, towards the direction of Tiantang City. This was really unexpected. The man in black was still dashing towards the peak of the mountain when he suddenly felt the strange sound of the wind behind him. Looking up, he was fuming with rage. Supreme Wind. Are the so-called 9 Supremes so afraid of death that their words are like farts? If you don't keep your word, what about you?
In the air, the sound of the wind was bitingly cold, and a voice echoed with loud laughter.
Please pass on a message to your boss. Setting up the same trap once is already too many. Don't tell me you expect me to step into the same pit twice? Do you pig-heads deserve to talk about the word with this reputed one? Is it because of your childishness that the Four Seasons Tower has built its reputation?
Amidst the guffaw, the wind billowed away, flowing 1,000 miles. When I, Feng Tian, dominate the world, I shall annihilate the Four Seasons Tower. The Four Seasons Tower's black-clothed expert at the mountainside was stunned as he watched the wind in the sky vanish with a whoosh. Then he cussed out loud, countless vulgarities spewing from his mouth. It was an endless stream of obscenities. Clutching his chest, he was so angry that his liver hurt. This supreme wind was simply too unscrupulous. Didn't you just say that a person can't stand without trust? Where's your tongue? Did you eat your own words? I've been waiting here like a fool for a long time, watching this guy talk to Yang Buotao for such a long time. Then, this guy asked me to wait for a while and took his sweet time to clean up the corpse. He's clearly agreed to everything, but after he's done, he turned around and ran. This was clearly King messing with people. The man in black was so angry that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. However, there was nothing he could do even if he was angered to death. After all, Supreme Wind's shadow was nowhere to be seen. In the end, he could only run to the mountaintop alone, muttering curses. Over there, the other side, there were also many people like him who had foolishly set up traps and waited for a few days. The green wind became faster and faster, gradually turning into a hurricane, sweeping across the sky at high speed. They headed towards Tiantang City. High up in the sky, the saber light flashed again. As expected, the saber in the sky reappeared and chased after him. He didn't fall for it? It doesn't matter. Even if he racked his brains, he wouldn't have thought that I've been keeping a close eye on him. He'll have to go through me if he wants to escape unscathed. If the legend of the 9 Supremes ends in my hands, it'll be a story to be told. Adding another page to my legend. The saber light was secretly pleased, determined to write another page of his legend. Having made up his mind, he became even more careful. After catching up to the sound of the wind, he followed it carefully and even purposely widened the distance between them. He was afraid of alerting the enemy and Supreme Wind would be aware of it, which would ruin the story. This return journey was led by Yang Buotao, so the speed was much faster than when they came. When they came, even if the person carrying Yang Buotao had a 10th perfection cultivation base, he was still carrying a strong man. His speed would inevitably be reduced. Now, the entire journey was at the speed of a hurricane. How could the speed be slow? On the contrary, the saber in the sky was not at all anxious. He was very patient now, leaning more towards using this opportunity to locate Supreme Wind's lair and confirm if there were any other 9 Supremes in the world. After all, there had been an attack of the mystical flame on the night of the attack on Yang Buotao. It was suspected that Supreme Flame was still alive. Supreme Wind was already under his control. There was no need to rush to take him down. As the chase went on for 180 miles, the majestic city walls of Tiantang City could be seen from afar. Suddenly, the saber in the sky was stunned. He was shocked to realize that Supreme Wind's will that he was tracking was actually gradually dissipating. After a while, it had completely disappeared. He had been chasing after it, his deific consciousness locked onto it. How could he have lost it? The saber in the sky was obviously unable to accept this result. After a moment of stupor, he began to circle back and forth anxiously in the clouds, searching the surroundings in vain. Compared to being deceived right from the start, he was more inclined to believe that he had been accidentally discovered by Supreme Wind and had used some kind of skill to temporarily dissipate his will. This was why the signs of his will dissipating had appeared. However, if this was the case, He could not have gone far.
He must be nearby.
The saber in the sky had spread his deific consciousness to its maximum limit, searching with all his might without any concealment, but it was still futile. He could not help but admit that he had been tricked. However, he still could not understand. He had chased after the other party all the way out of the city and all the way back. His consciousness had long been locked onto the other party. It was not an ordinary lock, but a lock of the soul imprint.
How could it suddenly disappear? Could it be that a person's soul imprint could actually vanish abruptly due to some kind of trick?
Was it not a skill that was above the legendary young god level?
How could Supreme Wind's insignificant cultivation base be able to do it? This saber light was hidden in a layer of clouds in a daze.
It was still puzzled no matter how hard it thought about it.
It was stunned for a long time.
There was only a feeling of being F***ed in his heart. The frustration and inexplicable sense of loss was enough to make one break down. Even though he was knowledgeable and experienced, he was still at a loss at the moment.
What was going on?
The truth was very simple. The hurricane that the saber in the sky had been tracking was only a manifestation of the wind attribute that Yun Yang had cast.
Although it had spirit, form, it was only sustained by a single breath. As the breath dissipated, the three forms, form, spirit, and form, would dissipate.
What was there to be surprised about?
As for Yun Yang himself, he had turned into a cloud and was still hovering in the sky above the mountain.
He had not gone far at all.
At this moment, the sky was covered in dark clouds, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. It looked like a heavy rain was coming.
However, the rain that was supposed to come did not come.
The rocks on the mountain peak below gave Yun Yang an extremely oppressive feeling. The oppressive feeling reminded Yun Yang of Tianxian Cliff and the tragic battle that had taken place there. Actually, the oppressive feeling here was much lighter than when he was at Tianxian Cliff, but the feeling was still the same.
There's indeed an ambush similar to the spiritual ceiling formation there.
Yun Yang cursed in his heart. After confirming the other party's setup, he could not help but be more careful. Once he was discovered and the other party activated the formation, the mystical art of manifestation would no longer work. It was inevitable that he would be in a very difficult situation.
He might even be on the brink of death. It was not only Yun Yang who was cursing, there were also curses coming from below.
That supreme wind is too slippery. King Hell, we're all prepared but he's not coming. Your father has waited for so many people to take off their pants and he actually gave up? Did he get cold feet? That B***starred ran so fast, he's gone in an instant.
What a bastard.
We've spent so much effort to set this up but it's all in vain. Why do I feel so stupid all of a sudden? A group of people cursed loudly. On the peak of the mountain, a man dressed in gold stood on the tallest rock of the mountain. His powerful aura enveloped the entire forest, his aura overwhelming. He stood out like a crane among chickens, far surpassing his peers. Yun Yang floated thousands of feet in the air, observing the situation below quietly.
He still had to carefully control his aura, so that it would not leak out amidst the gloomy clouds.
The rumbling of thunder and lightning continued to rumble, growing more and more urgent. It gave off the feeling that a storm was coming. Forget it, pack everything up.
The man in gold had been silent all this while. Finally he spoke.
Supreme Wind isn't here but the storm is coming. There's no need to waste so many good things.
The dozens of people who were scattered around appeared one after another, each of them cursing listlessly, but they began to pack up the things that had been set up in the forest.
Yun Yang's eyes widened at once, focusing his attention on the things that had been set up. One of them took the lead and took out a glowing object from under a rock. As the glowing object was removed, the originally oppressive atmosphere suddenly vanished like smoke in thin air, completely disappearing. Yun Yang's heart skipped a beat.
The howling wind in the sky grew even more violent as the dark clouds in the sky gradually lowered and the roar of thunder and lightning grew louder.
The people below hastened their movements, each of them working swiftly amidst the howling wind. The man in gold remained where he was, standing with his arms behind his back, his expression cold and hard. The man's eyebrows were like two brushes, thick and dense. The corners of his brows drooped and curved. His eyes were deeply sunken in their sockets, his gaze cold and emotionless. However, once one was stared at by this pair of eyes, one would feel as if they were being stared at by the Grim Reaper. It sent shivers down one's spine. The other men in black had their faces covered, but each of them was brimming with a powerful aura. Yun Yang's initial idea was to attack with thunder and lightning, using the advantage of the sky to annihilate this group of people. However, when he got closer and felt their powerful aura, he knew that even if he used all his current ability, it would be futile. Even if he could make them look pathetic, he would not be able to hurt them. Not only would it be futile, it would also be noticed by them. The man in gold, in particular, was shockingly powerful. He was not someone Yun Yang could shake with his current level. Yun Yang only dared to watch from a high vantage point, watching as the glowing objects were taken out. He could not tell what they were. Although Yun Yang wanted to take a look, there was a possibility that he would be discovered if he lowered himself any further. There was a huge disparity in their abilities. Once he was discovered, he would basically die. He could not take the risk. Since he had achieved his goal today, it was time to retreat. With a single thought, the sound of the wind grew stronger. The dark clouds in the sky actually moved slowly, rising higher as if a storm was brewing. After a while, the gloomy sky seemed to brighten up.
The man in gold lifted his head and looked at the dark clouds that had been covering the sky, as well as the bolts of lightning that slithered around, but they seemed to have lessened. Was the expected rain not coming, but the sky was going to clear up? How could there be no rain after being oppressed for so long? He had never seen such a phenomenon in all his years of life experience. Usually, there would be rain in such a depressing weather. What was going on today? He frowned. Suddenly, with a long howl, he sprung up. The light in his hand shone brightly as an unusually sharp sword energy soared into the sky.
Chapter 260. The cloud form was formless.
Even when it was broken for a moment, it gathered again slowly, as if it was not affected at all. The golden-robed man snorted and slowly descended.
However, his expression became increasingly gloomy. "Sir, did you find anything?" someone asked.
"No," the man in gold said darkly. The weather just now was like an impending storm, but there was no rain.
It was even moving and dissipating slowly now. "I was suspicious and wanted to test it out," he said eerily. "I think I was being overly suspicious. Such a situation would hardly appear unless supreme wind, cloud, thunder, and water were all here. But I didn't find anything when I looked into the peculiar deific consciousness around me. Even if the four supremes aren't dead, it's only been a year. They can't have all improved to the point where they can avoid my senses perfectly.
As long as I'm sure that it's not them, it's fine."
Yun Yang was drenched in cold sweat as he stood on top of it.
If he had not risen another 500 feet just in case, he would have been crushed by the sword light. Even if the cloud incarnation was not afraid of weapons and his life was not in danger, he would have been injured no matter what and revealed some traces of himself. Even so, his body, which had suffered a considerable amount of damage, still felt waves of pain all over his body.
It was uncomfortable and there was a splitting headache that lingered for a long time.
Just like what the man in gold had said, if it had been supreme wind, thunder and water here, they would not have been able to escape his detection. After all, it was impossible for the three of them to improve as much as he had.
Who was the man in gold? How could he be so powerful? The clouds continued to move slowly while the people below packed up quickly.
After a while, the men in black descended the mountain under the lead of the man in gold.
Seeing that the other party had left, Yun Yang had no choice but to return despite his reluctance.
However, when he was close to Tiantang City, he could see the saber light wandering around in the sky, searching for something, scurrying around like a headless fly.
Yun Yang snorted inwardly and rode the cloud up high, leaving quietly.
"I still have many things to do. I don't have time to play hide and seek with you." Somewhere far away,
in a gloomy hall, First Court King Qingguang was speechless.
His head was lowered. Spittle splattered all over his head.
"Are you stupid?"
A man in white robes and a tall hat had a look of disbelief on his face.
"Tell me, are you stupid or not?
It's been too many years since I've seen someone as stupid as you." Around them, there were 7 to 8 people who were rolling their eyes and crowding around First Court King Qingguang. "He's an idiot? I knew he was stupid, but I didn't expect him to be this stupid. He's too dumb's father, big dumb.
Dumber than a pig."
"In any case, I'm speechless, too speechless." "Eighth brother."
You better watch your mouth, you bastard. Don't insult pigs. How can a pig be as stupid as him? Don't praise him with sarcasm. First Court King Qingguang stood in the middle pitifully, looking aggrieved. How could I have known that this would happen? What do you think you can think of? A burly fellow opened his mouth, spittle raining down on First Court King Qingguang's face. No matter how stupid he is, he should at least take out the register and have a look. You even skipped this step? And he blamed himself for being cheated. Can you blame him? Even if his brain is full of sh*t, it shouldn't be like this, right? First Court King Qingguang kept his head down as he endured the scolding, pursing his lips and not saying a word. But this brat who issued the mission is also a scoundrel. He must be the type with sores on his head and pus on the soles of his feet. I'll go kill him. Another person stood up with a furious expression. Tell me his name quickly. I'll go deal with him. No matter how stupid my brother is, we can't let him toy with us. First Court King Qingguang grinned but did not speak. Could it be that you're addicted to being toyed with? Why aren't you telling us who that person is? The others pressed on. Quick, quick. It's fine that we've been tricked, it's fine that we killed He Hanqing, but we can't let this person who tricked us go either. The corners of First Court King Qingguang's lips twitched as he said, I definitely won't tell you this person's name. In other words, you can't kill him. The other 9 people squealed at the same time. Are you King stupid? You won't even tell us his name if you don't let us kill him? What are you thinking? Don't tell me you're enjoying being tricked? Are you addicted? You're a pig. Why am I comparing blindly again? Don't blame me. I can't King understand. Could it be that this fellow has fallen for the other party's honey trap? Tell me, is that person so outstanding that you've fallen for him? You don't say. Maybe that person is a peerless beauty, forgetting everything in front of a beauty. It's understandable. Even if it's understandable, boss, check him out. Don't tell me he's been hit by some strange secret technique. I think it's more practical to beat him up. Maybe he'll come to his senses. Someone rubbed his palms together, eager to give it a try. This person really can't be killed. First Court King Qingguang was on the verge of tears. If I could kill him, would I not let you guys go? Why can't we kill him? Does the other party have a strong background or a special identity? 4 to 5 people asked in unison. First Court King Qingguang did not speak again. Why don't you King let out a fart? A few of them stomped their feet anxiously, tugging at their hair as they spun in circles. Since when did you become so King taciturn? Aren't you usually so talkative? This person, First Court King Qingguang mumbled, his identity is very important. How important can it be? Another person said impatiently, even if he's Dugu Chao's illegitimate son, I'll kill him this time. Tell me what you're talking about. The corners of First Court King Qingguang's lips twitched as he said, this person is either Supreme Wind of the 9 Supremes or Supreme Cloud of the 9 Supremes. Once First Court King Qingguang's words left his mouth, everyone present shut their mouths. All 9 of them stared at First Court King Qingguang with widened eyes. The eerie hall was silent. After a long while, someone asked, How did you know? Are you really sure? First Court King Qingguang chuckled humorlessly. How could I not know? One of my gold-ranked assassins has been subdued by him. I went to look for him and fought him. Don't all of you know about the manifestation power of the 9 Supremes? One of the golden-robed men coughed and said, Are you sure? Or are you just guessing? First Court King Qingguang rolled his eyes. Do all of you really think that I'm that dumb? There must be a reason for this, otherwise, how could things have come to this? The brothers fell silent at once. I believe no one will forget the past in the haunting temple. First Court King Qingguang chuckled humorlessly. Other than eldest and third, the rest of the brothers were trapped in the strange environment of the haunting temple, unable to escape. Although our cultivation method is unique and can temporarily resist the haunting temple's strange power, we can't hold on for long. As time passes, we'll still be turned into ghosts by the haunting temple and be trapped in there forever. Luckily, it wasn't far from Yutong's battlefield. Coincidentally, Supreme Earth was manipulating the Earth Dragon to turn the tide of the battle. It was eldest and third who found Supreme Earth, Then Supreme Earth brought his two brothers to overturn the outer layer of the haunting temple with the power of the earth. Supreme would then guided a large number of plants to penetrate the haunting temple. Finally, Supreme Water's power seeped in and broke the haunting temple's seal, saving the brothers from their desperate situation. All of us brothers owe the 9 Supremes a huge favor. Although Eldest had given them some treasured resources as a token of gratitude, how could we forget this favor? How could we not return it? Although Supreme Earth and the rest didn't know who they were saving, nor did they know the true meaning of what they were doing. They didn't even know that we still have 8 brothers down there. But can we really forget their kindness of helping us out then? The reason I wasn't on guard then and was foolishly tricked was because I'd fought with this person then and was already certain that he was one of the 9 Supremes. That's why I stopped. That's why I didn't pursue the matter of him taking me in as a gold-ranked assassin and even showed him great kindness.
First Court King Qingguang chuckled humorlessly.
That's why I went there immediately when he came looking for me.
That's why I agreed without checking when he asked me to kill someone.
Because I knew that I couldn't reject him. I couldn't reject his request. Of course, this was also because I wanted to help him do something from the bottom of my heart.
First Court King Qingguang's face was bitter.
Although I didn't expect the person he wanted to kill to be Supreme Lord Spring Frost, this target was not only out of my expectations, it was also beyond my ability and caught me off guard.
I would still accept this request.
Actually, whether or not he was playing tricks, I would definitely accept this request. I believe that no matter which of the brothers were in his shoes this time, even if he were to tell everyone that his target was Supreme Lord Spring Frost, would all of you be able to reject it?
Who would dare say that he would reject it?
The other 9 people all had bitter smiles on their faces, and there was a hint of awkwardness in them.
Indeed, how could they not acknowledge such a huge favor? There was no way to reject it. Although the 9 Supremes don't know who they've helped, we owe this debt of gratitude. We can't just pretend that it never happened, can we?
First Court King Qingguang said, according to what we know, most of the 9 Supremes are either dead or injured now.
I guess there's only this one left.
It's fine if we didn't know about it, but since we know and we've been entrusted by him, we have to fulfill our promise no matter what.
A debt of gratitude is the hardest to repay.
If we don't repay this person, who else can we repay the favor to? Are we really burying our conscience and fooling ourselves?
First Court King Qingguang said in grief and indignation.
You call me stupid, stupid and stupid? Even if I'm stupid, stupid, and stupid in this matter, who asked us to owe him a debt of gratitude?
He asked for it, so we have to repay it.
Although this fellow might not know about it, we know.
Chapter 261.
After a long time, the golden-robed man chuckled bitterly and said, We found out too late when the 9 Supremes were set up by the Four Seasons Tower. By the time we rushed over, everything was already over. We thought that the 9 Supremes had been annihilated, and the Four Seasons Tower's ability was far above ours. No matter how unwilling we were, we could only pretend to be deaf and mute. I know that all of you are feeling heavy inside, like how ungrateful you are. It's hard to repay a debt of gratitude, let alone a debt of gratitude without a creditor. You know the way to repay the debt but you're helpless. But now, the remaining person of the 9 Supremes obviously knows that it's the Four Seasons Tower's doing. What he's doing is revenge. Oh, 7th has coincidentally met him again. We really can't ignore this matter. But we really have no chance of winning against the Four Seasons Tower. It was so back then and it's still the same now. The golden-robed man sighed. We've only digested less than 1/10 of the haunting temple's power the last time we obtained it. If we were given another 20 years, what would we have to fear even if we were to face the Four Seasons Tower? But now, we're really no match for the Four Seasons Tower.
Let's discuss what we should do about this matter, the golden-robed man said in a low voice.
First Court King Qingguang lowered his head and did not speak. The other brothers also had solemn expressions on their faces. It was not a trivial matter to face the Four Seasons Tower. The concourse of the underworld could very possibly be annihilated in a clash with the other party, leaving nothing behind. There would definitely be sacrifices among the brothers present, perhaps even a complete annihilation. It was a difficult decision to make. Let's not talk about anything else first. Supreme Lord Spring Frost must die. First Court King Qingguang mumbled in a low voice, I've already accepted the commission. I must eliminate this target no matter what. Still, none of the brothers spoke. After a long time, a burly man said, "No matter what, we have to repay what we owe them." Another man said with his head hanging low, "We didn't do anything when the 9 Supremes were killed. Even when we knew that we had no choice but to do it due to the circumstances, your father still feels that something's not right. I can't lift my head. Yeah, I keep feeling guilty. I've let her down. I don't feel good either. 7th brother is right. If you owe someone a debt, you won't feel good until you pay it back. If you don't pay back the debt of gratitude, how can you talk about reaching the peak, and how can your state of mind be complete?" The brothers chimed in one after another, lowering their heads and muttering to themselves. The golden-robed man frowned and said, "What do you want to do? Can't you just say it?" The brothers said in unison, "Big brother, you make the decision."
The golden-robed man was exasperated.
"Then what's the use of your discussion?" The person who had not spoken was the 5th Yama king. He had a square face and pondered for a moment before saying, "Although the concourse of the underworld is only an assassin organization, after we have received the power of the haunting temple, we are also an existence equivalent to the reincarnation of the underworld. The cycle of karma, good and evil will be rewarded. Kindness must be repaid and enmity must be eliminated. Otherwise, there will always be a barrier in the heart that cannot be crossed. Indeed, there is no right to talk about perfection. Therefore, I feel that we can't shirk this matter. Last time, we were cowards and have already caused a knot in the hearts of the brothers. If we were to shrink back this time, I'm afraid that it will form an inner demon. That will only bring harm to our cultivation, and the path of cultivation will be precarious. Therefore, I feel that we have to do this. We must do it, we must do it." The 5th Yama king's words were almost the final word. "All right," the golden-robed man said. "If so, we will do it. Our current target is only Supreme Lord Spring Frost. Let's get rid of Supreme Lord Spring Frost first and see the 4 Seasons Tower's reaction." The 10th Chakravarti king rolled his eyes and said, "We have accepted the commission and we have to kill. This is how we do things. So what if the 4 Seasons Tower has an opinion? Even if they come knocking on our door, we have an excuse. Must we not kill the 4 Seasons Tower's men?"
The golden-robed man, 3rd Court Emperor Song, chuckled bitterly and said, "Luckily, this fellow has only entrusted Supreme Lord Spring Frost. If he had entrusted it to Mr. Nyen—" The 10 brothers chuckled together. "If the target is Mr. Nyen, then we'll really have to. But we'll still have to do it." 3rd Court Emperor Song scolded, "All of you, shut up. Let's discuss how we're going to complete this mission." He snapped his fingers and said, "It's only Supreme Lord Spring Frost. We'll just kill him. Kill him." The other 9 brothers cheered loudly, their spirits lifted in an instant. 1st Court King Qingguang blinked and said, "This isn't an easy task. That fellow is a tricky one as well." The other 9 brothers turned to look at him with unfriendly gazes. "So what if the target is tricky? Weren't you the one who lured the tricky target here? Before we do it, why don't we get rid of this bastard first? Let's all have a good time. Let's have a good time. Go!" The 9 of them swarmed forward. They threw 1st Court King Qingguang to the ground in an instant and followed up with punches and kicks. 1st Court King Qingguang cried out, "Have mercy!" Bam 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 bam. Yun Yang returned to Tiantang City quietly and found a secluded corner to revert to his original appearance. He then returned to the residence of Heavenly Clouds with great fanfare. However, when he stepped into the residence of Yun, he was surprised to see Feng Mafei and the others wearing an odd expression. Just as he was feeling puzzled, he saw someone walking out slowly from the residence and looking at him with a smile. It was Qiu Zhenhan. Old Marshal Qiu was here. Yun Yang coughed and said with a face full of smiles, "Old Marshal, how do you have the time to come here? What a rare guest." Qiu Zhenhan tilted his head and said, "Why can't I come?" Yun Yang chuckled humorlessly. "Old sir, what are you talking about? Of course you can come. It's more than just being able to come. Your presence brings light to the humble abode of the Heavenly Clouds and fills the hall with splendor." Qiu Zhenhan snorted and glared at him from the corner of his eyes, saying, "Don't you play around with this old man. Where did you go to play again?" Yun Yang replied, "Didn't I go to watch the show?" Sigh as I watched, a fight broke out on the stage. Everything I saw was crimson,
flesh and blood flying everywhere. It was terrifying. This nephew was so scared that I hid and shivered for a long time. Only then did I have the strength to walk home.
Sigh, it was really all blood, Qiu Jianhan snorted. So young Master Yun is actually so cowardly? Yun Yang felt that the old man's words were rather sarcastic, so he said bluntly, "May I ask what old Marshal wants to do by coming here?"
If there's nothing important, I'd like to go in and catch up on some sleep. The commotion today was too shocking. I'm still dizzy from the shock. Go in quickly and rest up.
Qiu Jianhan snorted coldly and said, "It looks like young Master Yun is only watching the show today and has actually forgotten that today is the day you're helping His Majesty to relieve his stress."
I wonder what young Master Yun's serious business is? Yun Yang's heart skipped a beat. He seemed to have forgotten about this.
Helping the emperor take care of his body was a serious matter, and it was even more important. However, there were so many things that required him to personally handle them, so he really did not take the emperor's matter to heart. After all, the emperor's body was no longer that important. There were always priorities, and even serious matters had to be prioritized first and second. However, Yun Yang dared not say this out loud. If he did, old Marshal Qiu would definitely beat him up. Not to forget that other than being Yutong's old marshal, Qiu Jianhan was also the leader of Yutong's 3 rogues.
Haha.
His Majesty's matter is of course the most important matter.
Of course, it has to be dealt with first. I'll go now.
Yun Yang chuckled awkwardly.
Along the way, old Marshal Qiu Jianhan's gaze was fixed on Yun Yang, full of suspicion and confusion.
Yun Yang felt like there was a prick on his back, an indescribable discomfort, but he dared not ask aloud. He could only mutter inwardly, "Could this old man have seen through my flaws?"
Otherwise, why would he stare at me like this?
Yun Yang and Qiu Jianhan had only taken a few steps when they saw Qiu Yunsan and Xia Bingchuan of the 4 noble young masters walking towards them excitedly. Each of them was accompanied by about 20 guards, each of them in high spirits.
It was obvious that each of them was a top-notch expert.
Not to mention anything else. Just the rank of these guards was far above all the guards of the 4 young masters.
It was obvious that these guards were the pillars of the 4 noble families, top-notch experts.
Yun Yang made a rough comparison in his heart. Any one of these new guards by Qiu Yunsan and Xia Bingchuan's side was not weaker than the 4 Seasons Towers guards who had been protecting Yang Buotao back then. It looked like the 4 noble families had really sent out their pinnacle forces this time. However, would it be a little too extravagant to place these combat forces by the 4 noble young masters' side? With another glance, Yun Yang understood what was going on. Each of the 2 young masters was carrying a chubby mystical beast cub in their arms. Both of them were overjoyed when they saw Yun Yang. Xia Bingchuan aside, even Qiu Yunsan had ignored old Marshal Qiu who was beside him and dashed over excitedly.
"Boss!
Ha ha ha! Boss, what a coincidence, you're also walking today. Ha 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 ha!"
Qiu Yunsan said.
Boss, boss, boss. Ha ha ha, what a coincidence. I can't believe I see you in Tiantang City again. Ha ha ha, we brothers are really fated.
Xia Bingchuan said. What do you call this?
This is called being fated to meet from thousands of miles away. Boss, look at this. Qiu Yunsan came over with a fawning expression. Look at this of mine. Ha ha ha, this is my family's treasure. The tiny mystical beast in his arms that had yet to open its eyes was humming. Boss, look at this.
Xia Bingchuan took a step forward and pushed Qiu Yunsan to the side. You should look at this. This was just delivered. It's so cute.
Ha ha. I really want to swallow it. In Xia Bingchuan's arms was a tiny mystical beast as well. It had a chubby body, soft fur and a tiny wet nose. The corners of Yun Yang's lips twitched.
That was right.
These 2 were the cubs of 8th level advanced mystical beasts.
Chapter 262.
Yun Yang recognized the one in Qiu Yunsan's arms at first glance. This was indeed an 8th level Xian beast, without a doubt. However, this little mystical beast's nose seemed to be bigger than its face. This 8th level advanced mystical beast was called Three-Eye Boar. As the name suggested, this Xian beast cub's foundation was that of a wild boar, but a boar with 3 eyes. It was said that before the 3rd eye of a 3-eye boar opened, its combat power was very weak. It was not much stronger than a wild boar of the same size, let alone a high-level mystical beast. At most, it would have a powerful impact. In spite of this, the ray emitted by its third eye could kill a ninth peak mystical cultivator within seconds. It was truly remarkable. However, the third eye would need to grow to adulthood before it would open. Therefore, this three-eye boar was considered a useless 8th-level mystical beast that could kill enemies of a higher level. Other than that, this three-eye boar was no different from an ordinary domestic pig. It was gluttonous and lazy, snoring loudly every day. The corners of Yun Yang's lips twitched. It was obvious that he was not fond of such useless creatures. After all, a three-eye boar needed a long time to grow to adulthood. Although it was not as long as the 1,000 illusion monkey's 70 to 80 years of growth, it still needed at least 30 years. Yun Yang, on the other hand, was extremely interested in the three-eye boar's other characteristics. Three-eye boar's pork was a delicacy. What surprised Yun Yang was how the Cho family had managed to keep this three-eye boar cub. It was already difficult enough to capture a mystical beast alive. It was even more difficult to capture a cub. Mystical cultivators could kill mystical beasts, but mystical beasts that were in the incubation period would usually kill their own children before they died. They would rather kill their own children with their own hands than allow their children to be enslaved by humans. The higher the level of the mystical beast, the more it was so. The reason why Yun Yang found it odd was because of the three-eye boar's habits. An adult three-eye boar possessed the ray of death that could kill mystical cultivators beyond its level. If one wanted to capture a three-eye boar's offspring, it would be difficult to do so without paying a considerable price. A few ninth peak cultivators would be killed or injured at every turn. Even if one managed to capture it, it would require a long period of nurturing. Only when the three-eye boar reached adulthood would it be able to unleash its unique combat power. It would be difficult to balance the reward with the effort. Yun Yang was puzzled, but he did not show it on his face. He scanned the three-eye pig and thought to himself, "Sigh, it's too small. There's less than 2 caddies of meat. Let's talk about it when we're older." What would the Cho family think if they knew that the mystical beast babies they had painstakingly obtained were actually high-grade ingredients in Yun Yang's eyes? Yun Yang then looked at the 8th-level pinnacle mystical beast in Xia Bingchuan's arms. Yes, this cub's level was half a level higher than Cho Yun-san's rank 8 advanced three-eye boar, but it was more delicious than the three-eye boar. Because this cub was a gluttonous bear. It was also known as the 10,000 catty bear. As the name suggested, this kind of bear-type mystical beast was famous for its ability to eat. It was normal for it to grow to 7 or 8,000 catties when it was fully grown. It could easily reach the level of 10,000 catties. As for this bear's talent, there was nothing else but its immense strength. There seemed to be no conclusion as to how strong this gluttonous bear was. Most probably, the more it ate, the greater its strength. Due to its massive size, the way it fought its enemies was a slap. No matter who the enemy was, a slap would be delivered without a care in the world. It would be a piece of cake for it to destroy mountains, crack the earth, and shatter the clouds. Therefore, this bear's paw had a resounding nickname: the sky-shattering slap. Oh, there was another characteristic of this 10,000 catty bear. If it could not defeat its opponent with 3 consecutive slaps, it would immediately turn and run. There was no exception. This run was not because it was afraid of the enemy, but it was a strategic shift. Because all of its strength could only support those 3 slaps. After the 3 slaps, it could only recover after eating a large amount of food. Therefore, this gluttonous bear had another nickname: the 3-slap bear. The power of the 3 slaps was indeed formidable. A slap from a gluttonous bear that weighed 10,000 catties could even send a small hill flying. However, the problem was, what kind of enemy would stand there and let you slap it? This 3-slap bear, on the other hand, would spin its body 7 to 8 times if it could not even hit its opponent with 1 slap. Based on this alone, it was indeed stupider than an ordinary stupid bear without a level. If it were not for the bear's thick skin and flesh that ordinary 9th-level mystical beasts could not break through its defense, this bear species would have long gone extinct in this world. This gluttonous bear might be the easiest high-level mystical beast to obtain in this world, but it was also the most useless high-level mystical beast. If the 3-eye boar was of little value, then the gluttonous bear was even worse. In Yun Yang's eyes, the benefits of this 10,000 catty bear were more than that of the 3-eye boar. Bear's paw, delicious. Bear's gallbladder, an expensive medicinal herb. Bear's meat, delicious.
Bear's penis. Qiu Yun-san could use it. It would be useful if he ate it. Yun Yang looked at Qiu Yun-san and Xia Bingchuan speechlessly. You two noble families have been busy for half a year. And you've only caught 2 of these things? Each of you is weirder than the other. What are you thinking? Is your family planning to toy with the 2 of you or me? Qiu Yun-san and Xia Bingchuan blushed as they coughed. They could not do anything about it. If it were not for the fact that they had no other choice, why would they ask for trouble and embarrass themselves? Those mystical beasts that could fly and had innate skills were great, of course, but they could not be caught. Was it not because they were relatively easy to obtain that they had caught these 2? After all, they're solid 8th-level pinnacle mystical beasts. There's definitely value in nurturing them. Qiu Yun-san chuckled awkwardly. Yun Yang heaved a sigh of relief, speechless. Boss, look at us. Qiu Yun-san hugged the 3-eye boar excitedly while the piglet hummed in his embrace. Shall we begin? Scram. Qiu Zhenhan stood aside, exasperated. All of you scram to your father's side. The old man had finally unleashed his power. King Hell. Your father has been standing here for a long time. Have I become invisible? Why can't I see any of you? Why are you all so agitated? Qiu Yun-san paled as he turned his head slowly. Third uncle, what a coincidence. If you don't scram, I'll make both your cheeks and your buttocks say what a coincidence. You all look King the same. Qiu Zhenhan cursed loudly. You good for nothing, scram. And you. The old marshal turned to look at Xia Bingchuan. Can't your family send a good person out? My Yun-san has become a popinjay after following you bunch of useless things. You better stay away from my Yun-san in the future. Xia Bingchuan and Qiu Yun-san had no chance of defending themselves against Yutong's #1 old gangster. They fled in panic, like fish that had slipped through the net. The guards of both families bowed at Qiu Zhenhan awkwardly and left, exasperated. It was too embarrassing. We could recognize this 3rd young master of the Qiu family from hundreds of feet away, but these 2 fellows actually did not realize it even when they were so close to each other and spoke to Yun Yang for such a long time. There was no one else like this. It was appropriate to call them popinjays. They were a perfect pair, seamless and flawless. This Xia family's child is a disappointment. Old Marshal Qiu walked with Yun Yang, committing all sorts of crimes, indulging in debauchery, fighting, and flirting with women. Dong Tianling from the Dong family and Chun Qingfeng from the Chun family aren't any good either. Yet this one of mine likes to play with the 3 of them, learning nothing from them. What a sin! Yun Yang rolled his eyes. It was hard to say who would learn from whom when these 4 people were together. However, your nephew, Qiu Yun-san, is definitely a teacher. How dare you say that, old man? His Majesty was already waiting at the residence of Qiu. His Majesty was frustrated staying in the palace, thinking of going out every day. As for the residence of Qiu, it had almost become one of the emperor's temporary residences. Yun Yang said with a smile while clearing the emperor's meridians, Congratulations, your Majesty. After this treatment, the last bit of poison has been purged. As long as you're careful not to be poisoned again, you'll be fine. His Majesty's gloomy expression relaxed when he heard the good news. Old Marshal Qiu heaved a long sigh of relief. The heavy atmosphere in the room eased up. This Yang Buotao. His Majesty sighed and began to discuss Yang Buotao's matter. Both of them had long trusted Yun Yang, not bothering to avoid him no matter what they talked about. This time was no exception. However, no matter how they discussed it, they still could not figure it out. Yang Buotao had always been loyal to the Empire of Yutong. If he really had the intention to rebel against Yutong, he did not have to go through the trouble of betraying the 9 Supremes and colluding with other countries to rebel. Yutong's defense line would collapse and there would be no turning back. Therefore, there was no reason for Yang Buotao to rebel, but it was a fact that he had committed such a grave mistake. Even Yang Buotao himself had admitted it, so there was no way to refute it. His crime is unpardonable, but his contributions are undeniable. His Majesty finally sighed and gave his evaluation. Other than sighing, Qiu Zhenhan had nothing else to say. Yun Yang, on the other hand, felt waves of bitterness in his heart. Yes, it was for Yang Buotao. He was the only one in the entire empire of Yutong Who knew about such a renowned marshal of this generation? Yang Buetao's cause, grievance, anger, and helplessness. There was also the endless pity. His actions were against the law, but his feelings were pitiful. He had been kept in the dark from the beginning, deceived and used. However, the person who had deceived and used him was his own father. Even Yun Yang, the direct victim, could not help but lament for him. Yun Yang had even thought that if Yang Buetao had taken the initiative to confess everything right from the beginning, what would have been waiting for him? Perhaps he would still have died, but perhaps he would have been spared. Even though Yun Yang had wanted nothing more than to hack him into 1,000 pieces, skin him alive, and pull out his tendons, he could not help wanting to be merciful after understanding the root of the matter. Thinking of this, Yun Yang could not help saying, "Regarding Yang Buetao, this young one has a thought in my mind that I must speak of." His Majesty did not expect this fellow to suddenly interrupt and was stunned for a moment. When he had discussed national affairs with old Marshal Qiu previously, he had never avoided Yun Yang, but this fellow had never spoken a word, like a mute. He had never expressed any opinion. Even when His Majesty had casually asked for his opinion, this particular fellow had just brushed it off. What was wrong with him today? Speak of your thoughts. His Majesty seemed to be very interested. Just like your Majesty said, his crime is unpardonable, but his contributions are undeniable. Yun Yang spoke carefully. Yang Buetao's crime is unpardonable, but it seems that there's only punishment and no mention of his past contributions. How can his contributions be undeniable? Qiu Jianhan was taken aback. If he did not know that Yun Yang held the 9 Supremes in high esteem and had never been in contact with Yang Buetao, he would have thought that Yun Yang had the intention to reverse Yang Buetao's verdict. Chapter 263. Old Marshal Qiu's thoughts raced as he watched Yun Yang with interest, wanting to see what this fellow had to say. Yun Yang pondered for a moment before he said, "Your Majesty, perhaps you can consider writing biographies for all the loyal officials who have died in the war or passed away in the Empire of Yutong. Merits don't overshadow demerits. Demerits don't diminish merits. Record these people's deeds from a completely fair and objective point of view, so that these meritorious officials can leave their names in history. This is the final verdict." I think. His Majesty's eyes shone brightly. Old Marshal Qiu's sharp eyes glowed with a strange glow as well. This was a marvelous plan. Be it civil or military officials, who would not want to leave their names in history after toiling their entire lives? However, how many of them had been able to leave their names in the annals of history since the beginning of time? If this were to be done, not only would the families of the meritorious officials who had passed away feel honored, the officials who were still contributing to the country would also be much more motivated. What a great idea! It was not just a matter of Yang Buetao's family. His Majesty's foresight was profound and unfathomable. This is a great idea. His Majesty praised the plan directly. It is indeed marvelous. Old Marshal Qiu agreed. What about next? His Majesty pressed. Yun Yang was stunned. Tell us everything else you have in mind. Why are you keeping us in suspense? Old Marshal Qiu chuckled. Next. Yun Yang scratched his head. There's no next. His Majesty was stunned while the old Marshal's expression changed. Are you toying with us? You've already taken off your pants and now you're telling your father that there's no next? Have you thought it through? However, both of their expressions turned into one of mockery. This fellow was downright slippery, and slippery was his consistent image. It wasn't surprising for him to say that there was nothing else, or perhaps it should be said that it was within reason. It was already impressive that he could come up with such an idea. In spite of this, one could infer many things from one instance. With the most basic source, everything else that followed was only a matter of course. Although Yun Yang had only mentioned the beginning, both His Majesty and old Marshal Qiu had already thought of countless things to follow the moment the matter was tossed out. Even the process involved and how to utilize it had been thought of more than one level. Once the general direction was set, the rest was only to be perfected and implemented. Yun Yang, the initiator, was not insignificant in the follow-up. Instead, it was better to have none than to have one. His Majesty, who was well versed in the art of an emperor, subconsciously thought deeper and could not help taking a long look at Yun Yang.
Yun Yang's way of handling matters was meticulous and meticulous. His words were always simple and profound, his wisdom as vast as the sea.
He was never greedy for achievements, nor did he lust for power or position.
He was rather well versed in the ways of the world, able to advance and retreat with ease.
It was truly remarkable that such a character did not wish to become an official in the imperial court. It was a pity for Yutong. It doesn't matter if there's nothing else. The follow-up to this matter is vague anyway. With your popinjay nature, you won't be able to do it. However, Yun Yang, this old man has a serious question. Marshal Qiu Jianhan's expression turned serious. Where did the mystical cultivation method that you cultivate come from? It seems like Marquis Yun doesn't have such an extraordinary cultivation method? Yun Yang was stunned. Huh? What huh? Do you really think this old man doesn't know what's good for him? Old Marshal Qiu glared. This old man comes from the Qiu family.
Although I've spent most of my life on the battlefield, I can be said to be knowledgeable.
However, I've never seen such a mystical cultivation method.
My old friend, Yu Tixin, had once said that this cultivation method is absolutely unique in the world in terms of healing injuries, reviving the soul and prolonging life, expelling poisons and illnesses. Moreover, it has never appeared in the Tianxian continent for so many years. The appearance of such a cultivation method will easily cause a great disturbance.
I'm asking this question today not because I want to find out your background, but because I'm worried about your safety. Since the other party dared to poison His Majesty, they will keep a close watch on His Majesty's physical condition at all times. Once they find that His Majesty has recovered, they will definitely find someone who can help His Majesty get rid of the poison.
Answer me quickly so that this old man and His Majesty can plan for you.
You, how could you? Yun Yang's eyes darted around as his thoughts raced. It was true that the older one was the wiser.
Yun Yang truly did not expect this old man to realize something was amiss right from the start, but he had waited until His Majesty had fully recovered before he actually made things difficult for him.
This old man's ability to burn bridges after crossing the river was not lacking at all.
Yet, he was able to say it in such a dignified, open and above-board manner.
He was filled with the words I'm thinking for you, that's why I'm asking this question. If you don't tell the truth, then you're in the wrong. If you don't know how to be deeply grateful, then quickly tell the truth. My cultivation method is a coincidence. Yun Yang's mind raced.
I learned it from my master. May I ask who your master is?
Old Marshal Qiu snorted. Ling Xiaozue. Don't you all know? Didn't he come some time ago? Yun Yang pulled out an existence that he could not afford to offend and said, I thought you already knew about my relationship with him. If it wasn't for this relationship, how would I have dared to take the medicine that day? It was because I believed that my master wouldn't harm me that I revealed His Majesty's physical condition and offered the 3 spiritual medicines. If you still don't believe me, you can ask him. Old Marshal Qiu almost choked on the breath that was stuck in his throat. Yun Yang's answer was reasonable and logical. Most importantly, it was, asking me to ask Ling Xiaozue? Where the F***ck would I go to ask him? Was he someone who could be casually asked? Your words are still not entirely true. If Ling Xiaozue had cultivated this cultivation method, his achievements would have long surpassed this. Qiu Jianhan glared at Yun Yang. Besides, since when did Ling Xiaozue become your master? Yun Yang said seriously, Old Marshal, the cultivation method that Yun Yang cultivated was marvelous. You were the one who said it. My master's cultivation base level was also determined by you. This junior is not qualified enough to comment.
I can only say that I have not spoken a single word of falsehood.
Qiu Jianhan retorted angrily, Don't try to use words with this old man.
That's what this old man has done.
Do you think that this old man doesn't know that everything you've said is a lie? Yun Yang rolled his eyes. The title of the leader of Yutong's 3 top rogues was indeed well-deserved.
Even his covert words had been heard. But so what if this old man had heard them?
Would he dare to bite him in his face?
His Majesty could not help chuckling and said, Forget it.
It's always a good thing for a junior to have such an opportunity. Old Marshal, you really don't have to take it to heart. Not a single word of truth comes out of this child's mouth. Qiu Jianhan sighed and did not speak further.
He thought, Your Majesty, there are many things you don't know. My suspicions aren't limited to the cultivation method he cultivates. What he did not know was that His Majesty had a vague thought in his mind.
Yun Yang was magnanimous and had no intention of becoming an official despite his extraordinary intelligence. However, everything he had done previously had been on Yutong's side. Even if he could not recruit such a person, he could not be pushed too far. It was obvious that His Majesty's evaluation of Yun Yang was extremely high. He was already treating him like an otherworldly expert. When Yun Yang finally excused himself, he realized that he was drenched in cold sweat. Is old Marshal suspecting me? Yun Yang thought to himself, his actions today aren't because he suspects that I have ill intentions.
He's directly suspecting if I'm one of the 9 Supremes or if I belong to the 9 Heavens dictum. He left the residence of Qiu Zhenhan with a heavy heart and did not return to the residence of Yun.
Instead, he went to find out where Yang Buotao's wife was buried. Silently, he buried Yang Buotao's ashes on his wife's grave. Your family is reunited from now on. Meet again in the netherworld.
Yun Yang stood quietly for a moment and murmured, there are no more schemes in the netherworld, no father who would harm his own son. Yang Buotao, if there's a next life, I believe you'll still be a good man.
Mistress Yang, your husband has always been a good man, a good son. There's no need for you to be ashamed of marrying him. I am Supreme Cloud. I wish you both well and solemnly inform you that the 9 Supremes have no ill feelings towards you and your wife anymore. The grudges are settled, the past grudges are forgotten, everything written off. May the heavens bless us and we shall be good friends in our next lives. The wind was soft, the wild grass beside the grave swayed softly. It was as if Yang Buotao and his wife were waving goodbye to Yun Yang. There's no need to linger in the secular world. Reincarnate as soon as possible. Forget the regrets of this life and start the legend of a hero again. Yun Yang bowed slightly, straightened himself and turned to walk away. He had only taken a few steps when he noticed a few people walking towards him with quick steps. Yun Yang's heart skipped a beat. A gust of wind blew, stirring up a cloud of dust to cover the new soil he had just stirred up. He then hid in a dark corner. It was Shangguan Lingxiu, accompanied by 2 guards. Yun Yang was surprised. Why was Shangguan Lingxiu here at this time? You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.